Good evening, everyone. It is now 6 p.m. on March 20th, 2023. Please rise and join me for Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now 6 p.m. on March 20th, 2023. Rise and join me for Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
Every time this happens, it reminds me of the Muppet Show. Remember Dr. Bob, the
Yes.
voice, the boy, the announcer, and they would all be. That YouTube live. Thank you, Kyle. Patty, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Frank Bankert.
Present.
Councilmember Belinda Livingstone.
Present.
Councilmember Leslie Notero.
Present.
Councilmember Lloyd Roberts.
Here.
Vice Mayor Jody Shirley.
Here.
Mayor Dave Gaddis.
Here.
City Manager Kyle Reefler.
Here.
City Attorney Randy Mora.
Present.
And Councilmember Mike Zabel was unable to attend.
Thank you, Patty. We'll just move right on to item number 1, which is discussion of the Citizens Advisory Committee's recommendation for the stormwater project bond issue. This was placed on the agenda by City Manager Reefler.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm happy to be bringing this to the meeting tonight. Citizens Advisory Committee's been working on it for months now. Primarily the chair, Ron Saganik, and me and as well as Heather, our financial consultant, have been putting numbers together and working with some small banks and Chris Rowe, who kind of organized the financials of the loan that we're going to talk about tonight. I'm going to start off by talking about this first page, which is a spreadsheet. It's you got to unfold it, but it's hopefully you're able to see the numbers on there. I tried to make them big enough. And if you go to start on the left, the projects, you'll see this is the next 5 years of, well, I should say 2 of the years we're on the second year here, but it's the 5 stormwater projects that are remaining in the master plan. And if you look, it talks about the project, what streets it's on. It says the year that it was funded. So right now we're funded up to 17th and 18th, 19th, 20th, and 9th stormwater projects. That leaves the remaining starting next budget year would be 22nd, 23rd, the following Morgan and 25th, and then fiscal year 25, 26 would be 14th through 16th. It breaks down, as you can see, it has the BMP and it has the 2022 estimated cost of the projects. The projects have gone up with the estimated cost because we found out with the 12th and 13th Street project that it came out a little higher than estimated. So there's you can see notes all the way over on the right, assumptions notes, and it talks about increase budget by 30% fiscal year 22, 23. So all these numbers over here, they had 2022 estimated cost is a multiplier of 1.3 times the last estimated cost, which was done in 2019. So if you follow the budgeted for the BMP, again, if you get up to this year, fiscal year 22, 23, we're budgeted, for the 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th, and 9th Street projects. We have money that's on a savings plan that was projected for the next 3 projects, but we don't have it in the budget yet. The resurfacing portion of the project, so BMP is the actual stormwater, digging up, changing inlets, replacing pipe, engineer from our master plan, what the engineer recommended. The resurfacing portion, the next one over, is the coinciding streets to be resurfaced while the project's taking place. So it lists per project, the streets in the area. What I tried to do is our street index. You'll see just below that where it says condition 100-point scale. And then ranked, by total score of 100. The worst streets is obviously the red 0 to 20. And I tried to color code those without having the index in front of us, the street listing with how the condition it's actually in. So you'll see that a lot of these streets that coincide with the projects are, all the way from red to yellow, which is, pretty much the worst streets that are remaining in the city. All these projects, the streets that are incorporated with them will take us to resurfacing all the streets on the index that are up to like the yellow condition. The next one on the index was a green condition, which is fairly new. It's in good shape for our scale. So the resurfacing section is calculated out. I ran it through a calculator that has been very accurate, which I created about 3 years ago, and it's been holding true to the estimated cost of what the resurfacing would cost as part of the project. So what I did is I calculated out the streets that are remaining to be resurfaced and did an estimated resurfacing cost for each one of those project years. And then same thing for curbs. When we resurface the streets, we also change out the valley curb, and I ran the numbers on estimations for the curbs for those projects. Bringing us all the way over to the total budget, which kind of lays out everything with the accumulated reserves and the total project. So total project shortfall, and that's basically because even now, when we look at like 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th, and 9th Street, the resurfacing cost of the project, we actually do not have the total budget for. So some of these are even falling short. And you'll also notice that the 17th and 18th project, that was saved for 336 before we increased the estimated budget on each of the projects. So we fall a little bit short there as well. So what we did is ran all these numbers. So this is the total cost, which I broke down on the bottom here. You'll see, stormwater portion, the resurfacing portion, the curb portion, and that gives you the total project cost minus what's already accumulated in the budget. So it shows our current deficit of the total projects is about 2.8 million. And on the bottom here, you have a table laid it out per fund. So stormwater projects and the valley curb is part of the stormwater fund. The street resurfacing is actually part of the capital project fund, just to show the fund breakdown. What's important to know here is that we still have the ARPA money, which was injected into the stormwater fund, but it was brought up earlier. I want to make clear that when we talked about doing the undergrounding project, we talked about that money could make up that deficit that we had in the undergrounding project. So if that's how we applied it, I just want to make a note that I said the reserves to capital project fund for undergrounding project will show in the CPF projections, and that's the next couple pages that Heather put together. But just the money is in the stormwater fund, but just to be clear, if we're saying that money is going to the remainder of what was left on the underground project, then that 802,000 will be transferred from reserves to cover that part of the cost. But either way, that money will be spent. And in this case, it'll be technically spent and reimbursed from stormwater, but the budget all balances is what I'm trying to say. So just want to make that clear. And then if you go to the next couple pages, this is the projections that Heather ran for us. She kind of just broke down on the front here is sort of what I did in the table, which shows the amounts in the stormwater fund versus the capital project fund of our proposed loan that we're looking to acquire. And then this is probably the furthest we've come, definitely in the most recent years of laying out a projection of where we're going. And the general fund projections, if you look at the top, it shows us the pretty much the reserves, that's sitting there outside of the budget that we have accumulated. And we broke it down into some separate buckets to show you have the unassigned, which is money that is just, we've accumulated it. It's in accounts, it's collecting interest, but it is not assigned into anything in the budget. So it's completely outside of the budget. The assigned capital projects, we wanted to show what, per the last budget, what we allocated for future capital projects, and that's what that represents. Assigned for transfers, that is, what would have to transfer into another fund that current year. And then the 20% charter requirement that we just wanted to illustrate the number per charter that is 20% of the operating expenses of the city. And then through these projections, you'll also see that we kept the hurricane preparedness per resolution at $1 million. So that's not included in the unassigned reserves. That is separate in these projections. And then you'll see this is a general fund. It's important to note that due to the undergrounding project, you'll see if you look at this current year, we came up quite a bit and we're at about $4 million. We fall back down a little bit because of the injection into the undergrounding project, but then you'll see after that, our unassigned funds continue to grow. And a lot of this was done at a very conservative measures where only predicted 1% growth in revenues. You can kind of see in very small the percentages of what she projected and the expenses. She did about 3% across the board, except for personnel, which was the 5%. But using these projections, you can see that we're pretty financially healthy as a city. I'm going to let Chairperson Ron Zajanik go into the loan numbers a little bit.
Great, thanks, Kyle. And just to back up, this all started when we were tasked back in October to see if we could do something with the $1 million hurricane reserve. Just to let you know, when we talked to the banks wanted a 1.5% fee to put a $500,000 line together and a 1.5% annual renewal fee. And the legal was about 12 grand. And so it did make sense to touch that cash. And since part of the spirit was, can we take that, maybe $500,000 of that cash and then accelerate some of these stormwater projects? So in talking with the bank, I asked where the rates at today. This was back in October, and they're like 4.5%. And so we started working on this idea. And today, what I'll present to you is we've got two proposals from one from Valley Bank and one from South State. So South State has done the last two bond issues for the city, the one for the Bellevue Estates undergrounding and the one for the stormwater project. I'm retired from Valley. So Valley did not have a municipal division when I worked there, but they do now. And so just so I give you that disclosure, I don't work for them. I don't get paid by them, but I honestly think the South State is a better deal as you'll look at. So there's an analysis that I prepared. It's called City of Bel Air Beach Bond Comparison that you should have, where I side by side put the two loans. So from what Kyle had talked about, we're looking at a little over $2.1 million shortfall in funding. And so these are a 10-year facility. South State is at 4.36%. Valley's at 4.5%. They both have no prepay as long as it's paid off through cash flow. South State would have a 1% prepayment penalty. This was kind of been important to me because of the existing prepayment penalty on this particular facility, the 2006 bond issue. We did look at potentially to roll the balance of this loan in and just consolidate everything. But Chris Rowe, who's our bond counsel, noted that we would lose the tax-free status if we refinance an already financed tax-free loan balance. So that's why we've got 3 years left of payments that is detailed in the budget that Heather did. And so this is just strictly for the stormwater and the curbing and the roads resurfacing. Legal fees was a pretty big difference. South State was 3,000 versus 7,500. An anti-dilution test, that is basically a debt service coverage ratio. And we have that on the existing Truist bond of 1.25 times. And if you want to skip to almost the back of this presentation, there is an anti-dilution test that was prepared by Chris Rowe. We test out at 4 times, 4.03%. So what does that mean? That means so what we are pledging is our non-ad valorem revenue. It's not ad valorem, it's the non-ad valorem revenue. So we generated last year almost 1.8 million in non-ad valorem revenue. And so when you take our 445,000 in debt service, that's 4 times. So we're very strong. To give some perspective at the interest rates we're talking, the city could borrow 11.5 million and still be compliant, just to give you some scope. What was interesting is the banks started throwing out deposit requirements, and I failed to change my sheet. The deposit required by South State was initially $500,000. After the Citizens Advisory Council got together, the term sheet that you have, I requested them to lower it to 250,000, which they agreed to do. The good news is we can put that in a deposit bearing account. We could take the hurricane fund or just any kind of money that is in the reserves and park it there for them. There's no branch nearby. The closest branch is Dunedin. And so from a day-to-day operating, it doesn't make any sense. But if you'll see the deposit rates that they're paying, it's the opposite on the deposit rates versus the loan rates. So South State's at 408, and what they pay is effective Fed funds. So effective Fed funds today is 4.58 minus 50 basis points. So 408 is what they pay. Valley is paying target Fed funds, which is 475 minus 50. So Valley's paying 4.25. And just so you know, there's a lot of turmoil about banks this last week. In the state of Florida, banks are required to collateralize these deposits. Public funds are required to be collateralized. So they're super safe. It doesn't matter to the bank. And both of these banks are very conservative. So an interesting point is we could put the loan with South State, move the deposit relationship from Truist to Valley. And basically, if the Fed raises rates a 0.5 point or 1/4 point this week, we're going to be earning an interest on our deposits, which are almost 2.5 times what we're borrowing, equal the interest rate to what we're paying, just from a perspective. I did some other cost of the bonds. So the interest expense, if you ran it to maturity, and then the legal fees, and then the final bond amount. So what we projected was the $2,073,354. Then we have bond counsel fees. Then part of issuing a bond is that we are required to have our city attorney, his firm, to provide a legal opinion. And so that legal opinion fee is what was calculated in the original contract that we have, and then the bank legal fees. So you get the total. Your bond needed to fund at closing is $2,107,479 or $2,119,79. But really, the difference is the bank's legal fees in that. So what does this do for the city of Mallard Beach? First of all, the residents benefit from getting their stormwater water projects accelerated. We anticipate at least a $250,000 in savings on the mobilization fees. We estimate there'll be about $500,000 of mobilization fees if we're doing these in annual chunks. So that 250 would be a pretty dramatic savings. Combined with the interest on the cash reserves to be equal or higher than the bond interest expense. You making interest expense, negligible, if any. And then also, Heather did a great job with the projections. And if you look out where on the general fund, we'll be back to over $6 billion in the 25, 26 and 26, 27 fiscal years. I ran some math that if we go ahead and prepaid $1 billion and then just kept the payments going, this loan would be paid off in 5.5 years with a total interest expense of $342,623. And what we didn't calculate in here is the savings on materials and labor by getting it all done today versus spreading it out over the next 3 to 4 years. So put some more, you guys have copies of the actual term sheets. I did amortization schedules, so I'll be open to questions.
Council. Yes.
Yeah, I think that was great. I think there'll be an added benefit as well. My guess would be that because this is a larger project, and I know we can't really necessarily put a number to that, but we'll probably have larger firms bid on these projects that will probably bid better pricing, more competition. I think that's going to be an additional. I realize we can't really put a number to that, but I think we're going to see that benefit as well.
Others? Are we going to be doing multiple streets at one time? Because we're saving on mobilization, you said?
So we still figure this project is going to take place in about 120 days, maybe 150 based on the size. But we still imagine that they're going to work from one section to the next. So it'll be over multiple streets because when they do the paving and things, they're going to want to bring them in and do it all at once.
How much money did we get for Pennies for Pinellas for undergrounding?
For undergrounding, I don't
It was
think I
over
have
2 million.
It's like 902. If I remember right, it was like 902,000, 2 years, so $1.8 million.
$1.8 million?
know.
Yeah.
That's what's remaining, but we, I'd have to, actually, I might have it.
And we have money still coming to it.
Let me pull it up for you.
So in the budget that Heather prepared, once it's all said and done, about 3 years from now, we get a final
Okay.
what we funded.
So this current budget, the total we got for Penny 4 is $4,123,000.
4 million total.
Yeah, so this prior year funding up to before this budget year was 1.3 million. We got another 930,000 this year. And then we have another 930,000 next year and the following year.
What am I missing here? If we would have took 2 million of that and put it into our infrastructure, why would we need a bond?
The penny money,
Yeah,
penny money has to be used towards undergrounding.
Yes.
well, that's the way we allocate it, but not the way the blueprint for the Pennies for Pinellas County. Pennies for Pinellas County emphasized stormwater projects. That's the first thing they really pushed for. This council, before I sat on it, started using that money for underground. So,
I think part of it is, just to be clear, is a good portion of that. I'm not going to say half of it, but probably 40% comes from Bel Air Shores.
a portion of that comes.
Yes,
What
so-
what I'm saying is we're collecting $4 million total and we're having a deficit. And what really scares me is our deficit right now is 2.8. And there's been talk that we're going to use this ARP money, which is $802,000, pull that out. So now we're going to be at a 3.6 million or $3.7 million deficit.
No, we didn't say we were pulling that out. I don't think that's
Well,
ever.
that's been talked at
So,
from day one.
so the penny 4 money that, that 4 million, that's dedicated completely for undergrounding, but each year we get, capital revenue for, Penny for Pinellas money. So that comes in each year. This past year was 170,000. So it's not as much.
So I understand, but I'm just saying, if I wasn't on council, I've objected to this undergrounding. I think stormwater projects are essential to the city. It's right in our strategic plan. It's one of our goals. And to put the city in hock, which I'm going to vote for because it needs to be done, but this is how big government starts taking over. When he just said we can go with $11 million and we still would be in the good. I just hope we have a little bit of foresight in the future. When we have money given to us, we use it for what it's supposed to be used.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's just a small portion of the pennies for Pinellas money that was allocated specifically for Gulf Boulevard beautification. Is that right?
So, like I said, last year we got $170,000 revenue. But if you look at the Penny Fort project reimbursement program, each year we're getting 930,000. That specifically has to be used for beautification. Because that's how the agreement was signed.
Which would have paid for this project.
We could not,
Before all of our time. I mean, it was something that was agreed to years ago. This is not something any of us had any,
And this is every community up and down the
Yeah,
beach.
yeah.
It isn't just us.
yeah, it was agreed.
yeah,
By anyone that fronts Gulf Boulevard, basically. So just, I have a question because I can't quite put my finger on it. What are we collecting on the stormwater fee? What's the revenues of that?
currently it's, I believe, 175. Look at this in the back here.
So annually, 175,000.
Yes, and that was, from what I recall, this, 175. The starting assessment, we wanted to look at it in the future to reassess.
I'm just looking at that compared to the debt service on this.
Now, I think when Heather did the projections, she did a 1% increase on that. Which is not very significant, but just so you know. Let's see, so it went from stormwater, it went from 175 this year, and she put a 176, 750 to 178. So there's a small increase that she built in 1%. In, I guess, a projection of like in the next 4 years, we're probably going to raise it somewhat.
Slightly,
Yeah.
right? So when I'm looking at that, I mean, we nearly, it's about 50% of debt service annually. We're
Hmm.
collecting stormwater fees.
But historically, the city's funded stormwater projects out of the general fund.
Yeah, I know. And
Yeah.
I'm just going, compared to when we started this stormwater project, the entire budget was $4.5 million. Here we are, how many streets have we gotten done? And we're still at 3.8 million because of the increase in costs. So,
Why we want to do this.
right, so it just makes complete sense. I mean, I don't, it's kind of a no-brainer.
And that's one of the reasons we're here today, because we were afraid that this would happen if we didn't do something. I think you did a great job of researching this and providing us with all these numbers. Do we have other questions from the council?
Has all the engineering been done for all these streets? So it's shovel ready?
So the master plan was preliminary engineering, so we'll still have design.
Have we ever addressed doing this thing the right way? Because people on council have said, well, people see their streets ripped up and then we get a heavy rain and there's flooding right after the new stormwater pipes have been installed. So have we ever addressed putting catch basins, pumps in with the engineers? Because I would like to bring them in and see what the total cost of that would be to get, because if you do it right, you probably would get rid of a Cat 2 storm here.
So to my knowledge, nothing has been put together as a proposal from an engineer for that idea. I do remember after the 7th and 8th Street project, you bringing it up.
Yeah.
So, we could get some numbers. Just
And we still have flooding down on 3rd Street and that on high tides and that. I mean,
We're gonna ever fix some of this stuff, but it certainly would make sense that when you talk to engineers, maybe Mr. Banker can get involved and
Mhm.
ask his questions.
And every street's going to be a case by case situation, but there's certainly nothing wrong with asking while they're doing their surveys and planning if it's feasible to look into some type of a collection or a pump system.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Roberts.
I think another benefit that's been identified here is that, Frank, so if we have some extra monies available at the end, we can accelerate the repayment 5.5 years. So we don't have to wait the full 10-year term, which I think is great that that's in there because that's not always in bonds or loans. So it's great that that's there so that if we have some money available, we can say, okay, we're paying this baby off. And there's a substantial amount of money that can be saved from an interest standpoint for the city, which is great.
Well, this building gets paid off when, next year,
No, 3 years.
3 years?
Other questions or comments?
Just one quick question. So the 9th Street BMP, does that include for lack of a better term, the tree streets, the cedar and the palm?
It
I
does
know the
not,
resurfacing was.
it's
identified.
resurfacing and the valley curb would be the only stormwater component of those 3 streets.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were there initially identified stormwater issues with those streets?
I'd have to look back at the
Okay.
report that was in 2017, but we did do the dredging of the retention pond
Right.
that did assist with the water that comes off of Spruce and Cedar.
Okay.
Goes to that pond.
So that's probably something I think we want to take a look at and just not address their issues, because I have talked with some people there. There are issues with the retention ponds and the fact that we don't have a stormwater pipe there where we can actually put the valve system to prevent backflow, things like that. But maybe there is something we can do there to actually put a stormwater pipe there to prevent the backflow from the bay coming into those areas. Something like that. So we can identify that like we talked about earlier when we talked with the engineers.
What's next?
My goal, if you guys are on board, I was going to bring it to the next council meeting.
Yeah, so just a sidebar, Chris Rowe will be ready to be here on the April 3rd meeting. He'll have the documents ready. This rate is good till April 7th. Sorry that it seems like there's a fire drill, but I'm sure rates have pulled back a little bit. So I'm sure this rate would still be the same if we wanted to, but kind of the way we're fast tracking this, it's fast tracked to you all. It's been over 6 months that we've been working on it. Just it's taken time to get things done, but yeah, the chain of events would be Chris would be here. There'd be a approval of the city council meeting, the first meeting in April, and then they'll have the documents already for you all to sign, and then the bank can fund it later in the week.
All right, well, let's find out then. Let's see what the general consensus is. I'll start with Vice Mayor Shirley.
I say we move forward. I'm in complete support.
Ms. Livingstone,
I'm in agreement.
Mr. Bankard,
Move forward.
Mr. Roberts,
Move forward as well.
Ms. Notaro,
Yes.
and I also agree. So let's go ahead and get it on the agenda and put it up for a vote at the next council meeting.
Okay, thank you.
All right, can everyone hear me? I feel like I'm not speaking very loud, but the pollen has gotten to my voice. Right, we are on to item number 2, discussion on Triton diesel generator for the community center. This was placed on the agenda by Councilmember Roberts.
Yes, city manager Riefler and I had a couple conversations and we came to the conclusion it'd probably be a good thing to go ahead and put this on the workshop agenda. I think Kyle has done a great job in evaluating other opportunities out there. I know initially we had funded, how much was it, Kyle? 250,000
50, yes.
for a new generator. So I know he's done a lot of due diligence out there, taking a look at other available options. This particular one is a used diesel generator. So Kyle, at this time, I know you've looked into it a lot. How do you feel about this particular option from what you've looked into so far?
I think after the discussion, we were kind of caught up on the fact that we wanted natural gas, but when we were looking for a more economical option, we realized that, we can get a fueling company to fuel a diesel generator and also save on costs with a portable option. I feel like we've kind of worked to about as best it's going to get.
Good.
But I think it's much better than what we were looking at because we budgeted the 250, which at the time the generator was, somewhere like about 220. And then we got that recent source well quote that was, I think, putting up like 280. It climbed quite a bit.
And this particular used option is the
So-
number we received so far as well.
Yeah, this is off of I believe a source well quote as well. And we're at the 97,000 price point. And that includes the tank and the trailer. But this option would be to hook directly into the connection points that previously exist with the transfer switch. There was one other option which we kind of discussed, at least I did, with the sales. And I believe it was about 132, and that was if you were going to put additional connection points over in the parking lot. The benefit to that it would get you a couple feet of elevation as opposed to being over here. But if we're looking at that kind of flooding, I don't know. If we're just kind of weigh out the situation, if it really makes that much of a difference, because we're not going to be here for the time period,
Right.
and we'll tow the generator over to Bel Air Bluffs to keep it operable until the water's down, if we're worried about flooding coming up on the building.
Okay. So this particular generator will provide us complete power to the entire building or portions of the building?
So it was the original design was the 100 kilowatt generator to run basically what we calculated the power demands for the building. That was with some cushion. This is 88, which is on the 3-phase. So I can have our engineer kind of look at it, but this was
Okay.
be enough to do the whole building.
Excellent.
Because, at the highest demand, summertime, AC's running and everything, we were able to calculate that it would be conservative to have 100 kilowatt would run it.
Perfect. And so if the diesel tank is completely full, I know you had got an answer for me on that. How long would that last?
So the tank itself is 680 liters of diesel, and in the features, this is sub-base tank up to 45 hours, but if you calculate the consumption of liters per hour, if you're running a full load, which would be that 88 kilowatts, you're going to get about 38.85 hours. If you're running at 75%, you're going to get closer to, it's 49.27 hours. So
Okay.
depending on what you're running at, you're going to get longer. So, if we're in a state where we're just running, we're using this as an EOC and we're running, the AC on that side and, internet connection communications, it's not going to be as much as if we had this, all the units for this room running full
Sure.
bore, using it as some kind of shelter or pods
Okay.
for the storm.
One thing we may want to pursue, and maybe we've already addressed this, is that the diesel providers out there, I know from past experience, we can make contracts with them, because if we have a catastrophe in the area, oftentimes you could be on the short list. And if we run out of diesel fuel, nobody's able to provide, because there are contracts you can put in place so that we're at the top. And so when we say, hey, we need some fuel, we'll be able to get it. Sometimes you pay a little bit of an additional fee up front for that, but obviously in an emergency situation, it's worth that.
Sure.
So that may be something to take a look at, just so we're basically guaranteeing,
So you pay a premium for a guarantee.
right, that if we need diesel fuel, we're at the top of the list or close to the top, so we're going to get that type of a deal. So that's something we can look into just to make sure, because obviously the worst case scenario, we have a catastrophic storm come through. Our initial allowance in our tank runs out. And then we say, hey, we need some more diesel, and they're like, sorry. So it's of no value at that point.
Right.
But there are contracts we can put in place to assist us in that area, I think. So great job on this, because I think this saved the city a lot of money. And I think it's going to provide the solution we need. There's obviously exercising of the diesel generators that we need to do on a weekly basis or a bi-weekly basis to make sure it continues to run so that when we do need it, it's ready to roll.
Kyle, is there an option for a larger tank?
I haven't asked, I can check.
Because I don't believe 45 hours is enough protection. Whenever Irma came through, there were places that were down for 10 days without power. Obviously, we're on the main line, but still something I would like for you to look into.
Is
You
this
can get you can get a breeder
above-ground,
tank on there.
it's an above-ground tank, or you gonna, I mean, is
It's
that?
right on the base.
Oh,
so
it's
it'll
right
be
on the
between
base.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
under it.
Self-contained.
And
okay.
so, and then the entire apparatus is on a trailer, correct?
Yes.
You didn't find out, first of all, how many hours are on this one? You know?
About 40 running full bore.
No, I mean,
Oh.
no, I'm talking about.
How many hours?
Yeah, it's a used generator.
It's it's got a 1-year warranty on it. You can do a warranty extensions, which
Yeah,
isn't
but
too
I'm
bad.
saying It's a used generator. Is there 2,000 hours, 1,000 hours, 500 hours?
I can find out. I'm
30,000
not
hours?
sure.
Yeah.
I'll find out details. and be referred.
The only other problem I have is John Deere is a good piece of equipment. When you use diesel fuel and you store diesel fuel, especially in this climate, you get a lot of algae in that tank. And bang, when they get into them filters, you're not going to get nothing but problems.
I might have a supply of them. Might have a supply of those, but anyway, yeah.
Or you can put all the additives you want, but
Yeah.
I've seen tanks just totally can get contaminated. But you've got a maintenance contract on this, right?
Yeah, there's
Yeah, I
maintenance
see it,
contract
yeah.
options. You can extend them up to 5 years. I believe.
Which should be really, and a lot of these maintenance contracts don't test for algae, and that should be one of our sources, because there's nothing worse than starting a generator up, running it for 5 hours, and then it goes
Mhm.
off. But good job.
Any other questions or comments on this?
I think you answered my question about the, it has a 1-year warranty on it, and I'm assuming it's tied into the quarterly maintenance agreement that lasts for a year. And you said that there's an option to purchase additional maintenance on that.
Yes.
So maybe looking at the cost associated with that additional maintenance as well. I don't see it on here. I just see the general for the 1 year.
I believe it was like a 2-year edition, was about 3,000, and then you could get up to 5 additional years. And I think those are around 5
Okay,
to 6,000, so it was reasonable.
okay, all right, perfect. Thank you. That's what I was
So I have
curious about.
a couple of questions too. If this is mobile, I'm going to assume that it will sit in place and have a continuous connection to our system, and will have a schedule where it starts on its own and,
Well, part of the maintenance
them
contract, they'll
do.
come and they'll start it
okay,
and, make sure it runs and test it.
Okay.
And then that's really up to us if we want to keep it. It would be back in that corner over there. I think the last one, they might have kept there most of the time before. But we also could trailer it behind the building,
mhm.
if we didn't want it out there all the time.
But I think she's wondering, is it going to be
it's-
an automatic start? Because
Right.
this thing will have a pigtail that you're going to have to plug in.
Most of
Yeah,
them do, like
yeah.
most of the commercial ones I see, they will come on every,
Right.
whatever, Monday morning at 10 o'clock, and they run for an hour and shut off.
This
So
won't.
Okay. Let me check on that. I don't think it would.
Yeah, because you'd have to have a whole integrated circuit for that.
Well, and I think it has to be permanently connected.
Yes.
For it to run through its normal charge cycle and all of that. Ours comes on, I want to say ours starts up. We have one similar to this at the office, and I believe it comes on about 3 times a week.
yeah,
Just fires up, annoys people for a few minutes and then shuts back down. But I get notifications every time it happens.
Okay.
And so it may be something worth looking into, but the question is how do you connect it from this building to wherever you want to put it?
You'll have to have a pigtail
Right.
apparatus.
We have the cables.
Yeah.
We currently have them, but you'd have to run them out the little door and hook them up.
All right. Now let's find out what that are we on any sort of a deadline right now, timeline on this offer?
Again, a time period on here. I want to say like 30 days. So we're pretty much coming up on it again. I can check on where we're at.
Says quote expires 15 days from issue date and the date being January 26th.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
this page.
Oh, labor prices and quotes. Okay.
And it
So
is
15
portable is what, is that what we were comparing to? Is that your other quote was for a portable generator like this, or was that a
No, that-
generator installed on a
That was
pad?
on a stand. Yeah.
Yeah.
built
Permanently mounted and attached. And that was natural gas also, correct?
Yes,
Just so we can kind of think about what we're comparing to, that's something to think about. And we have natural gas here at the building, right?
we do.
Right, then.
Mhm. It's an expensive price for convenience. It's a big night and day difference in cost. So that's something else that we should consider. Also, there's always a possibility that something could happen to it while it's being transported.
My thought is moving this thing to higher grounds, or would it make sense to have a, kind of like you would a truck, ramp, a truck ramp, ramp it up and just, keep it elevated on site. And then you start adding costs like that, then does it make sense to have a portable one? I don't know. I'm just thinking it through and just some of the thoughts that I'm having. So
And this quote is expired now. Is that correct? Is that what I heard?
Yes.
Okay, so we'd have to do a requote anyway. And whenever you consider portable, the only option is diesel. I do have one more question. So this building is running on generator power, and people are returning back. Will the doors be open to the public to come in here and get some relief from the heat during the day?
Yes.
Would we provide drinking water, things like that?
We'd have to stockpile water, but if we could get it transported in as part of from the county and from the state, yeah, we could have it in here. But our intention was to, when we open this back up, to run AC and have a cooling pod for residents. Well, we're providing information on inspections, permitting, loans, all that stuff after a storm.
Right, okay. And that's the only way that I would vote to approve something like this, would be that it didn't just benefit the office, it actually benefited everyone. Mr. Roberts.
We had asked about a time frame. So obviously June 1st is rapidly approaching with the hurricane season. So it would be nice if it's even possible. Do you think it's possible at this point, Kyle, that we could actually have the generator sitting out there prior to June 1st?
That I gotta verify, because when we saw what happened with the playground, I mean, I don't
Right.
know, supply issues, I'd have to check. Haven't gotten to that point.
Because it would be something that would be nice if in fact we could have some out there prior to June 1st and say, okay, we've done our due diligence. We've got a generator there. And of course, June 1st is the official date for the hurricane season. That doesn't mean a hurricane doesn't come through on May the 15th. But that might be a good thing to have in place if we had that there. And let's say June the 15th, we had a major hurricane come through and we lost power for 10 days. and we had a generator in place to power this building, that would look good and be effective.
Well, considering that this quote is already expired, you're going to have to get a requote anyway, and we don't know what the actual cost will be. I'm assuming that the way things are going, it's probably 5% more at least than what this quote currently states. I would also, I still would like the council to have both options to look at. Permanently mounted, whatever that is, versus this portable generator. I know that this is much cheaper, and I'm not in the mood to spend a whole lot of money, but at the same time, we want what's best for this building, this city, and our citizens. You're going to have to get a requote anyway. I would like to ask you to get both types of quotes that we can look at one last time, because whether you're getting one or getting two, I'm assuming it'll be about the same time frame.
Yeah.
Council, thoughts?
I agree. I'd like to see it side by side. And I know it's unusual to have that at a council meeting, but could we just maybe have it for the council meeting if you get it in by then?
I'll try to.
Yeah, not that we can really discuss much, but at least we have the information and
But we can certainly discuss whatever you'd like during the city manager's comments.
Sure.
Okay.
What would the process be if he comes back with a quote next month? Would we have to run this through the public twice to purchase this, or can we just purchase that right off?
I don't think it requires doing anything but just
Approval from
voting on
council. Yeah.
it during a regular council meeting.
Good.
The two reading requirement is with ordinances. There'd be no ordinance associated with this as long as it's within the purchasing guidelines of the city, as long as.
I didn't know if there was a threshold of money value though.
I would, of course, look to Kyle and work with Kyle and make sure that we've checked that, but ordinarily, there's no statutory requirement of multiple hearings.
You know, if you're able to get quotes before the meeting, that would be even better. And that way we would have them in our hands and we could look at
As
both
soon as I
and
can, I'll
kind of
give
weigh our
email.
odds that way. Any other questions or comments on this topic?
good job.
Okay. There may be somebody, Kyle, with the state of Florida. I don't know what that title would be, but somebody has to be in charge for the state of Florida with regards to all the assets. And there are times where they will actually make things like generators available,
Mhm.
where they've replaced them. And they'll look upon a smaller city like Bel Air Beach and say, would you guys like to have this? That's a possibility. So the first step obviously would be to find out who that contact person is for the state. And they have obviously a tremendous amount of generators out there that they use for their buildings, permanent installations, as well as portable generators. So there may be something available out there for somebody like our city that we could actually get.
I don't know about this state, but most states, like where I'm from, Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, they're mostly leased a lot by Caterpillar or whatever like that. So when they're removed, Cat takes them back, John Deere takes them back, Cummins takes them back, and then they go on the market for sale. Are you saying this state has an allocation that they purchased the whole generator outright?
Yeah, I know for Swift Mud, we
Yeah.
had quite a few and they were purchased. Yeah.
Yeah. So what'd they do with them then? They just gave them away or sold them?
Sometimes if they were going to upgrade, they would trade in, just like you would a
Yeah,
car.
right.
But other times they may just make them available to somebody who may be interested in them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else? No. All right, well, let's move on to item number 3. Discussion to increase fines for parking violations placed on the agenda by City Manager Riefler.
Thank you, Mayor. Our Community Services Administrator put together this local listing of the fines in the area. So we focused on what the initial parking violation for overtime parking would be, which is, if you don't pay the meter, And then what the, if there's any additional charges after so many days, a late charge or whatever. So we compiled it together and just wanted to lay it out so you guys could have a good look at just kind of what the surrounding cities are doing. One thing that jumped out at me is like Indian Shores, they got a $50 initial fine. And then if you can see most of these municipalities, they double their fines after 15 days. Some don't, but most do. And it's also interesting to note, like some of the cities that have their own police department that use the district court, that's established in court if there's any additional fees.
Okay, so what are you looking for there, Mr. Reefler?
So we did a resolution to raise the rates on the meters. I'm looking because if we raise our meter rates and keep a $35 ticket, we might, we may not get people paying the rates.
Not when it's cheaper than paying the meter all day.
So if it was something, because it was brought up to consider raising the parking tickets, and I wanted to present just kind of what we're looking at in the area before we did so.
Well, let me ask you this. Who's going to enforce this?
Yeah.
Who's going to, right now, it's my understanding that we rarely ever, tickets are rarely ever written for parking. Is that true or?
Most tickets are written on a night shift by one of the deputies, does the majority of the tickets, but we don't, maybe 2 to 3 a shift,
That's every day?
most days, yeah.
Okay, all right.
And that's for.
Especially the
parking here?
weekends a little bit, the weekend gives you a little bit more tickets because you just get the volume.
Is that parking just in this area or you're talking about Morgan Park and everything?
That would be Morgan, mainly Morgan, but Morgan Marina, City Hall and Bayside.
Okay, and what about parking illegally on the street? How often are tickets written for that?
I'd have to check that.
Okay. And the reason why I ask is because it happens all the time. And if we're going to raise the rates and we're going to try to enforce this, we don't want to make it cheaper to park in the street illegally. And so whatever we do, we probably need to do it citywide, I would think.
Yeah, that does bring a good question, though. Do we ticket? Mostly if it's ticketed on the street, it's for someone fishing or something like that. Like I know, for instance, someone that got a ticket fishing off of one of the piers that wasn't a city resident, not for fishing on the pier, but for parking their car in the street.
Right next to the sign that
There's
says
no parking.
no
yeah,
parking
yeah, yeah,
citywide.
Right. So it's a young guy, but, so, do residents, I guess my question is it often that residents have guests and they get, the guests get ticketed or, because I don't know if we're opening a can of worms. I agree. We need to jack these rates up because clearly someone's going to, I'd rather pay the $35 fine than worry about feeding the meter. I mean, it's cheaper than parking down at Clearwater Beach. Pay the $35 fine.
Right, exactly.
What are you gonna do? You're gonna pay $10 for 3 hours or $35 for all day?
Right.
Right.
You leave the
This is what
ticket
it
on your
comes down
window
to.
and you stay there, right?
I am thinking that we're the $100 fine.
Yeah,
if
I just
you-
don't want a resident's guest to get $100 fine. That's what I'm concerned about, I guess.
Would you say the $100 straight up first?
I'm
I think so, too.
For meter, not feeding the meter, not paying your parking fee and
I know that's.
Mayor,
Yeah.
just while we can certainly have that discussion, I would just like the opportunity to research our ability to do so. As you look at the highest on that chart is $75. The mean, median, and mode tend to track closer to 30 to 35. There is some statutory authority as you look at Florida statute 318.18 and others that might suggest that number needs to track closer to 30. I would, of course, I would look at that. I think that looking at that number, the fact that there is no outlier there in this community suggests most of the communities track towards that statutory language. I'm not telling you, you won't find a community in Florida that finds that high. I don't know if they've been, if they've had legal analysis done on it or challenged it. But I owe it to you as my client to raise that if we go as high as 100, if there is a challenge to be had, you're inviting it. I'm not saying that there certainly is. I'd like an opportunity to analyze that a little more closely. It's been, the last I looked at that meaningfully was about 3 years ago. Obviously, a lot happens session to session. I'd like to make sure that that authority is current.
Would you also make a recommendation whenever you come back with those answers?
Absolutely, sir. I would. I won't recommend a precise amount, but I'll at least recommend what I think is
Maybe a suitable range.
Yeah,
How about
a
that?
range that you may wish to consider, but
Well, IRB 75.
Right,
But you see they have no late charges.
yeah.
But every other beach community is at least 50.
Is that the caveat here if you don't have any late charges?
Well, I don't know. I see 60 at Madeira.
Right, with an additional 30 if they're 14 days late.
Is that the thing? If you have a late?
oh, I'm not saying that at all. And please understand that when I give advice, advice may not always bind
No.
action. I would give you advice and you folks can decide
Yeah.
for yourselves what you're willing to move forward and do. But I owe it to you as you're workshopping this
Sure.
to raise.
Right. No, I appreciate it.
There's a reason, there's likely a reason why you're not seeing that, because I'm sure you as legislators and community members are not the only ones who, I've said somewhat in jest to some of you in other contexts that anything that's punishable by a fine is legal for a price, right? And so there's that notion. And so I understand what you're trying to address. But I owe it to you to just make sure that that issue is discussed.
So going back to Vice Mayor Shirley's questions about, okay, I have guests and now they're getting $100 ticket for parking in front of my home. I think that situation is a little hard to address. And the reason why is because you never really know what situation is going to crop up.
I've never seen it an issue, but I'm asking, do we know how many tickets have been issued in that circumstance?
Typically, the deputy will do a warning. They will ticket for on-street parking if it's a repeat offense, but most deputies they err to the side of education first, so it's
That's
a
what I
warning
thought.
ticket.
Okay.
And I think there's also a provision that, if you're having a party or something, you can call and say, I'm going to have 6 people park on,
Right.
22nd Street
Mhm.
in front of my house, and they stay on one side of the street. Because I know we've done that from the condos. If there's going to be a huge group, call and say, tell everybody to park on this street. So you can do it without a ticket. You just have to, shall I say, plan ahead.
I know there's a lot of on-street parking on my street and no one gets ticketed, but I'm just asking because I don't want it to bite us later as being a problem. So I've never had an issue. I'm just want to make sure that we're not creating a future problem is all. If we raise the rates.
I've never had that problem either,
No.
but however, I will add that I have driven down 22nd Street many times and there's a car parked illegally right next to the bridge. And you can lower your window and even warn them, go in the house for a few minutes, turn around and come back. They don't care.
Mhm.
They don't care. They're still doing the same thing. This is what I would like to address because it is a problem.
Mhm.
You go to other communities around us, even over in Bel Air, and because they allow parking in the street, 2 cars, one on each side, you can barely get through.
Mhm.
And I moved away from that. I moved away from Seminole for that very reason. Well, that and because I like water, but that's the last thing I want to see is just more and more cars coming into the community and just parking all over the place. I think maybe if the council agrees with me, maybe what we should do, rather than having Randy reply back to us, first off, are we all in agreement that we would like a much higher fine? And do we have some sort of a cap, or am I just, do I sound awful by saying $100 for a
I was
fine?
gonna say 250 and there's no additional fine. That would appease the county.
Well, and the reason why I'm saying this is because what I'd like to do is task Randy to work with City Manager Riefler. And then he just give us something to vote on whenever we come back. But I want to know if there's a specific cap that we do not want him to go higher than.
I'm gonna say if we use this guide, no lower than 50 and no higher than 75, and then you can add some penalties, after 15
Has to be a
days like
late
they've
time.
done, but I think to say, hey, we've done our research and this is what all the surrounding communities are doing. And if you look at the beach communities, they're all in that range.
Yeah, that sounds good.
I'm fine with that. And I think that we can see how it impacts the problem. Go ahead, Mr. Roberts.
Yeah, Kyle, just a couple of quick questions. So let's just take the marina, for example, or Morgan Street. How do we identify with the current parking system that we have that somebody has not put enough money in? that they've
Currently,
expired.
you have to walk around to the front of the vehicle, look on the dash and see a ticket. This is the time that they can park till.
Okay, so I'm sorry, they'll tell them right then that at 1:15 PM, it's done and it's now 2:00. So they're due a ticket.
Right.
Okay, how much of that, whatever we decide on, how much of that ticket money goes to the city? All of it?
All of it, the way the current system works, which is our own tickets.
Okay.
Yes.
And if with the new system that we're getting ready to implement, do we know how easily that's visible to a deputy that they've expired their time?
The new system is going to be a lot easier for the deputy because they're going to be able to pull a listing of paid plates as they enter the parking lot. So they'll be able to just cross-check a plate.
Perfect. So they'll have access to the automated system
Yes.
to say, okay,
Yes, it's
2,
all
7,
web-based.
and 9 have expired. Perfect. That's great. Okay, and so then they could write them a ticket at that point for X amount. And,
Yes.
and we're good. Okay,
And we did agree to 100% pull the old meters out, right? Okay.
Yes.
And the one thing I'll just add for context, and I'm not saying this is across the board in my limited experience from an administrative standpoint, where you see that change in rate past day 15 is if you come and pay it in-house within day 15, fine, we don't really have a lot of administrative costs added to that. After day 15, we're sending it to local ordinance violation court. Now there's administrative charges, they're processing it. And you're getting less capture on that. But two, there are additional administrative charges associated with that being prosecuted, pursued otherwise, or just simply processed.
Is this why they have the after 15 days?
That's what I'm getting. That's why some communities have after 15 days. And that depends on that community, their ability to manage such a process administratively, bureaucratically, however you wish to describe it. But if you can get to our clerk or somebody or our system, if you have it online by day 15, fine, pay the $50. But then day 15, now we're sending it over to the court. And they're going to charge us a filing fee and all these things. And so, the rate changes.
And so.
That's my experience. That's been my experience in other communities. I can't say unequivocally everyone does
Well,
that.
it's
but-
interesting because Clearwater says 23% added to the total ticket, including the late fee. So that's the administrative fee, probably.
We currently don't send it to court. We send it to a collections agency. Yeah.
and
That's
some
why I
cities,
said I didn't mean to speak to everyone.
some cities give you a discount if you actually come and pay the clerk. For example, Kansas City, $50. You come in directly and pay the city clerk, give us 23, we're good.
Yeah, Reddington Shores.
Yeah.
Might as well park in the street.
So that's interesting. Reddington Shore, same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly the
I think
same thing. They
they're gonna-
copied them.
Go Monday morning, pay the clerk $23.
And you'll see some of these cities don't actually have metered. So that's their parking ticket
Yeah.
for other violations of parking.
Okay,
Yeah, I would think that just to simplify things, the fine would double after so many days and then stop. And then that way it covers all of the PIA that goes along with having to administer this. Randy, thoughts?
No, none further, Mayor. Not, I mean.
Okay,
And
the
then-
doubling after 15 days, and then just halting, does that sound reasonable?
That's typically how it operates. There's no, it's not, it doesn't accumulate thereafter. It's not like a daily code enforcement fine that compounds. Typically, it's flat amount at this point, flat amount at that point, and then,
And then
you
done.
know, and then it's just handled. Either it's ignored or it's paid, but it's handled.
All right, if everyone agrees, please add something, make it an agenda item and give us something to vote on, and we'll determine then if we're moving forward with it.
Okay, just as a follow-up for the Park Mobile, the contract's been signed. They're supposed to assign a project team to install, the signage and get us up and running. I'm going to follow back up with them to find what the timeline is for that. So currently, we just finished that, finalized that resolution. I'm not sure if you signed it tonight for the actual the meter, the rate increase. But depending on the timeline, just because if we were going to raise the rates on the current machines, there's a programming fee charge that if it's a matter of weeks, then don't want to pay it.
I understand. Okay, and did you put it in my packet?
Do we have the resolution for the mayor to sign?
Thought it was already signed. Did I miss
I
one?
did.
I have, I'll go get what I have. I have
several
things in there for you to sign.
Okay.
For
so
some
we'll
reason, I
get- so
thought
we'll
it was
get
Randy that didn't sign them.
We revised it.
Ah, okay.
Because the addition of the effective date and the 3 hours versus no hours limitations was revised to
Okay,
incorporate that. And so we need signed as passed.
all right. Whenever we take a break, which will be in about 20 minutes, if you don't mind, would you get it and I'll go ahead and sign it?
Okay.
All right, thank you. All right, any other discussion on this before we move on to item number 4? Right, item 4, discussion of the 12th Street beach access. I do not know who placed this on the agenda.
So I put that on the agenda and it was my recollection of the council meeting, but after going back to the audio and listening to what exactly was said, I believe you said that it may be, the discussion of, non-residents being on the beach, maybe a discussion at a work session in the future, but it wasn't actually an item that was supposed to be put to work session. I know
I mentioned
something about the bike rack. I just wanted to update. We ordered a couple new of the recycled plastic benches. Given that there's 3 benches already at 12th Street, I'd like to start with just 1 additional bench because no other park actually has 6 benches. So, and I did bring it up in the Parks and Recreation board meeting, just, because we're doing assessments of the parks that I wanted them to look at what the amenities were at each park and, make recommendations as a citywide basis of where we need additional benches and such.
Okay.
As I recall, there was someone asking if we could put bike racks
Correct.
in there but they were also the same residents that were complaining about non-residents using the beach access. So I think if you put bike racks in, it will create the ability for those non-residents to come and park all day at the beach and use up their beach access. So I don't know, there's a conflict in what they're asking for, in my opinion.
I think they weren't asking for bike racks. They were complaining people were chaining their bikes to the benches and you couldn't sit down.
And could we have a bike rack so they could change their bike
Yeah, but I
to?
didn't think, I think somebody on council brought up, is there bike racks there? And
Yeah.
there is no bike racks there. And I brought up that, all the cars have to have a sticker on them, but what you just said is you can stand there on that bridge at 10 o'clock in the morning, just watch all the electric bikes come over and they filter to 6th Street and 12th Street
Mhm.
and they park there. I got pictures where they've actually set up tents, like canopies, 2 bikes, pin the blanket up. And I took this to Mayor Schmidt and he goes, that's the least of our problems. Guy has a sense of humor, but they actually were camping out underneath their the seawall. They put like 2 bricks on the seawall with the cover and drape it over the bikes.
Hmm.
And it looks like Hobo Village, but
It's a tough
I,
one.
I wouldn't want to see any bike racks there. And I think if you park your bike there, you should have to have a sticker on it.
Well, and, yeah, that's
it's
almost
tough.
where we're ready to go to.
Yeah.
Because it's another vehicle and, I don't really know what the solution is. We discussed this back whenever it hit the fan over the umbrellas and COVID was going on. And the only reasonable solution that we could come up with at the time was to issue some sort of a tag that you put on whatever it was you were taking that said, hey, I live here. And that was about all we could come up with. And the bicycles, unfortunately, they're getting more and more powerful. They have longer battery life and they go fast. And that's why there's a big push not to allow the e-bikes on the beach at all. And it could be that, I mean, we have control over that lot. We can pretty much say whatever we want to on that lot, and we could just say no e-bikes allowed. And then,
Or anything.
and then that way, if you come onto the beach, at least you've worked up a sweat to get there instead of flying over. But
It's a problem even on the sidewalks. I mean, they're riding on the sidewalks.
I agree.
It's a real issue.
And all of the beach communities, they're having to address this in one way or another. And many of them are seriously considering just banning e-bikes all out. I don't know. I don't know what the solution is for Bel Air Beach. I suspect that it won't be long before we start getting those scooters that are all over St. Petersburg and Tampa,
The stand-ups.
where they just litter everywhere because they have a homing mechanism on them, and the crews just ride around and collect them every so often, but they just drop them off wherever. And they don't even have to be responsible for them. They just let them go and walk away, and that's that.
Yeah,
And
my
the city
my
of Seymour.
daughter goes to Tampa University. They're all over. They just lay them on the side. They don't even stand them up. They just lay them on the sidewalk and you
Yeah.
can trip over them.
All it's going to take is one of those companies to show up in Indian Rocks Beach, and we will have them. We'll have them on our sidewalks. We'll have them on our beach. So
So I guess, is there anything for us to do on 12? I don't know that.
Well, I
we're
don't know
putting an
either.
extra bench And that's it right now, right?
And I was we just have to decide if there's really anything we can do. And if it is, do we want to go to that extreme to where we require stickers for your bike to identify the residents, and non-residents. And then once they get there, what can you do about them?
I was
I
gonna
mean,
say.
if there's a bicycle on that lot, what can you do about it?
And I don't want to carry a tag to the beach. We're not New Jersey. We're not doing that.
Right.
I'm just sorry.
Carry a what?
No, but you
A
can get,
tag to the beach, like a lanyard saying I'm a resident of.
Yeah,
Bel Air
yeah, I
Beach.
know,
I'm
I
not
know.
doing that.
And that's why we didn't move forward with
Yeah.
it, because it just, nobody wanted
It
it.
gets too,
Well, you
it
could put
becomes
it-
too much.
you could put a sticker on the handlebar or someplace on the bike, on the main frame. I mean.
Yeah.
And charge the residents a few bucks a year.
Randy,
Sir.
what's your thoughts on tagging our bicycles?
I can't say that I've specifically analyzed the issue of tagging bicycles or other multimodal transportation to the beach. I think my bigger charge or reminder to each of you is that the beaches are public parks in a general sense. And where communities have implemented measures that were designed to limit public access to parks, they ended up getting sued. They ended up entering into consent judgments with the ACLU or some other entity where you've made it clear, and I'm not suggesting that's what you folks are specifically doing. You're trying to address, nuisance and detritus in your beaches, but where that dialogue starts to push from, we want to do it in a way that we make sure only residents are there. That's where you're going to start to see challenges.
Okay, so, but that's not really, we're at a disadvantage and an advantage with 3 lots, where there's 3 lots that are deeded access for Bel Air Beach. And my question is because we're already regulating it and saying you can't park here because you're not a resident.
Yes, sir.
Can we do the same thing with bicycles? You can't bring your bicycle in here unless you're a resident.
I've not specifically analyzed it as the short answer. The longer answer is I can see the analogy there. I think the bigger issue is, as the vice mayor has alluded to, the practical elements of that. Cars are registered to with the DMV, who they go to. If I just ride my Schwinn and leave it on the side of the road, and you have to hope that you find me at the same time I'm going back to my bike to know it's mine, versus, anywhere from anyone else in John Q. Public. I think that there's, from an administrative standpoint, a more difficult enforcement element.
All right, and then what about nuisance bicycle parking? So they come up to the bench and they chain their bike to where people should be sitting. Do we have any repercussion on that?
I mean, I think we can make it a violation of the code to, adhere your bike to any structure not specifically designed for bike structure to include, but not limited, benches, signposts, et cetera. Again, the issue is going to be, to whom does that citation issue? If your deputy's walking the beach and sees one on a bench, and I'm not saying you shouldn't regulate it for this reason, just understand if your deputy goes there and, Belinda says, hey, deputy, the bench right over here at the 19th Street access, it's got 3 bikes on it. Okay, I'm gonna go over. I mean, do they leave it on a sticky? How do we know that it gets there? Put it on its own laminated lanyard in hopes that the people find it and don't allege that it was, discarded or lost in the weather. I would also like the opportunity, if we do go down that road, to talk to whether it's PCSO or other units and see what, if anything, we wouldn't be the first one who've had this problem. What solutions have other communities devised, and can we implement them?
How about just a sign on the bench? Please don't chain your bike to the
Yeah,
bench. I
and-
mean,
and-
that's-
and I think
That's the
that's,
first start.
yeah,
Certainly.
And the same before most communities, and even those communities who have chosen not to regulate smoking on beaches, for example,
Mhm.
because of the carve out for cigars.
Yeah.
It really relying on a thank you for not smoking. Yeah, we're not going to issue you a
Clean up
violation,
after
but
yourself, yeah.
it will get some people, or at least people who just weren't sure. Somebody's still going to be like, what do I care? I mean, I was 17 once. I know how that works. What are you going to say to me? But I think by and large, you get most of the general public captured through that, rather than creating a bureaucracy around enforcement.
Plus, we have enough signs out there. They could chain it to the sign, right? If they really rode a bike down there and wanted to chain it up, Typically, I would think if you're riding your bike, you're watching the sunset, your bike's gonna be leaning against something and you're watching the sunset, and you leave. I can't imagine someone just leaving their bike there and.
I don't know.
And my assumption-
Not all actors are rational actors.
I know.
I mean,
And I go to the beach often, but I have not
Never.
witnessed the bikes being chained to the,
I know I might lean mine against the bench, but I'm not leaving it.
right. All right, so I think,
Clarification though, we're talking about the beach accesses. So can we put regulations in those beach accesses with our ordinance?
I'd have to specifically see what documents we have about that. Again, that was kind of my point on the front end of, if this is intended for public parks and public park access, less likely. The mayor had suggested there are some lots where maybe the analysis is slightly different. Regardless, once we get to the point where if we get to the point where we're talking about real policy, I would want to make sure that we've made those distinctions and those kinds of questions are answered. Obviously a different analysis, right? Going on the edge of City Hall versus in the sand on the way up to, in the sandy areas or edge of the pavement as you get to where people access beaches. That's where you're likely to see bigger problems, for sure.
I think your point is though, they're Bel Air Shores beach access.
Yeah.
Oh, if it's their property, it's straight up it's not ours to regulate. I'm operating on the assumption we're discussing city property, whether we have deeded access to property, it's not our property to regulate. Just as I may give my neighbor an easement to go over to get to the lake, if I ultimately decide to, they can't come over and say, I wanted to mow the lawn this way and put these pavers because I'm using your walkway. It's still my walkway.
yep, okay. So at this point, I don't think that we have any action items or any follow-up on this item. Are we in agreement?
Mhm.
Yes. Okay,
It's
all
12th,
right.
19th.
Let's see here. Now we're on the item number 5. This is discussion to move council comments immediately following the citizens' comments. It was placed on the agenda by Councilmember Banker. Mr. Banker,
Yes, well, this actually goes back to number 12 because the same resident was wondering why he can't get an answer from council and has to wait until council comments at the end of the meeting. This has been brought up a couple of times since I've been on council because we don't interject with the community, or we don't interject with the residents. So if the residents are really the integral part of this city, then I submitted 2 resolutions about being able to address citizens during citizens' comments. I never got a second out of either one of them. But some of the arguments were, well, we could get into a heated debate and everything like that. Since we don't debate council comments, why can't we just move this to right after citizens' comments? If a council person wants to comment on whatever the citizen said, we can do that. If not, it just, it dies. But rather than having citizens stay here all night long, which a lot of them don't do, and even that citizen left, I think it should be moved because I believe before I was on council, citizens' comments were either the second or last item on the agenda.
they were moved, I believe they were moved to the end of the agenda by Mayor Manzo. And that was, I don't know why he did that. And then I did a resolution that passed to where we moved the citizen comments to the beginning. And the reason why I did that was because whenever you make the citizens wait till the very end, there's no one here. So
My point.
So you were able to pretty much control who spoke, because if you had an agenda, if you were pushing an agenda, you would get your people to wait around till the end or show up towards the end of the meeting and then keep us here all night long with a back and forth dialogue. And so I asked to move them back to the beginning, but I was not able to, I couldn't, because I wasn't the chair, I was not able to stop the back and forth. And so the show that was happening at almost every meeting, instead of us sticking around for another hour or two and almost killing each other, it all happened at the beginning of the meeting before we got to the regular agenda. So I made some notes on this item. If it's okay, I'll go ahead and let you hear my thoughts on it. For the sake of meeting efficiency, agenda items take first priority because each council member has taken the time for careful consideration and preparation. They know what's going to be on the agenda. So they put a lot of thought into it. And because we approve the agenda, that's the very first thing that happens. We run through the agenda in the order that it's presented. Citizen comments were moved to the beginning of the meeting so they could be heard without being required to stay late. However, these comments are not on the agenda. Therefore, if a council member would like to respond, they may do so after the approved agenda. I only moved the citizen comments to the beginning to give us time to consider what they said. And then towards the end of the meeting, if we decide that we want to have differing opinions on whatever the citizen comment was and we wanted to have a discussion, it would come after the meeting. As it stands, the way that Mr. Bankert is asking, we would have not back and forth conversation with the resident, but it could turn into where we're having a heated debate before we actually get through with our general business and our regular agenda that we've worked so hard to prepare. And it sort of derails the meeting. Also, let's see here. I just wrote down council comments are at the end of the agenda. Let's see. If specifically to address the direction the meeting went, the various agenda items we went over, citizen comments and items they would like to discuss in the future. However, they do not come before our approved agenda. And the reason why is because a council member may want to respond to a way that a certain vote went. Okay. Mr. Banker, great example. We do the council comments immediately following the citizen comments. And then later we have, we vote on something that you feel very strongly against, but it passed. Well, now you have no voice to speak on that topic. And so that was kind of my general thinking was I want to get through our general business first. And then I appreciate the citizens speaking and I respect each and every one of them. However, I do not want to put their personal agendas ahead of ours until we have time to think about it, possibly put it on a work session and bring it up for a formal vote if it's something that we feel strongly about. And that's where I stand. I'll take comments from other council members. Yes.
I agree with you totally. I would
Thank you.
not move the council comments up to the citizen comments.
I can just address some of your points. True, okay, the approved agenda has, layout, format, blueprint of what we need to get discussed. But two things are on that agenda: citizens' comments, council comments. So it's always been, to my understanding, and for 2 years that I make a comment, other council members can't really comment on my council comments. It dies after I get done. True, council can say, I didn't like what happened during an ordinance, any type of agenda item. But council has the luxury of always debating that before it goes to a vote. So even if it goes to council comments, or even if council comments are first and they're not last, it still dies anyway. So my comments or her comments or anybody's comments, whether you get them out during the debate, is up to you. Again, if the citizens are the most integral part of this city, let's answer their questions while they're here. If they're not, then this part will die.
I appreciate your comments. I'll take more. Yes.
I don't think there's going to be a perfect solution to this issue. Because, Frank, so let's say some people come up for the citizen comments. And so they want an immediate response. I get that. If we move that up forward, because we want to make it more time effective for them, there may be people here that are waiting for item number 7 on the approved agenda. So now they're delayed. So they're thinking, man, I'm listening to this stuff for 30 minutes now and dinner's cooking or whatever. So that it's being less time effective for those people that are waiting for a specific agenda item. I think there may be a way, and I hate to even bring this up, that if we had a special line item in the agenda that wasn't exactly titled council members' comments, something else that was right after the citizen comments, and we still had the council comments at the end, but something that would be available to just address what the citizen said. But I think we could potentially lose a lot of time there because it would be uncontrollable potentially. Although there wouldn't be a back and forth, each of us would have an opportunity to address what specifically was mentioned in the citizens' comments. And we may say nothing. If we had an item there, they say, okay, is there anything for whatever we want to call that? And we could just say, look at each other and nothing. And the mayor would say nothing. We move on.
And you have that right to under cities.
Of course.
Okay, you
Of
don't
course.
have to address what they bring up, but what I'm
Right.
saying is, there was a woman here who was concerned about her handicapped child. So someone from council could say, I'm going to address that with the city manager when he gives his report.
And that would be
And
the
then
end
she-
of it.
And then she could leave,
Right.
okay, or somebody would, there was a time about why are the benches loose, okay, at 12th Street. Well, we'll address that, hate to keep throwing you under the bus, but we'll address that with the city manager,
Yeah.
but she's not going to debate me, I'm not going to debate my comments. All we're going to do is address the most important people, the taxpayer. You're giving consideration to the people that like this building up. That's all
Actually,
I'm
I
asking.
think what you're doing is you're picking and choosing which person, you are setting the agenda whenever you force a response on a citizen.
But what I'm saying is the free will of addressing it or not addressing it. You don't, I'm not saying you have to address, not anybody from council has, my position is not forcing council to address citizens' comments. It's giving council the opportunity right after citizens' comments.
But it would never be a back and forth. It would just be the
No,
citizen
no,
talk.
just like citizens,
Right.
just like council comments. No, there's not.
I would like to hear other opinions.
I've served under 3 mayors, and one mayor in particular allowed comments, and it turned into back and forth. The way we're doing things now is very efficient.
Mhm.
There are times I have to say where I want to respond to someone. I get that. I mean, it's very difficult the way we do it now. It's hard to move on when there's a question asked and we can't answer.
Especially whenever they're demanding an answer. But the truth is that there is a process.
It's very
There
efficient
is a
now.
process that, you could ask the question, you can pick up the phone and call any council member
Absolutely.
anytime you want to. You can email them, you can whatever. And if you don't get a response, you can really become pesky about it and get a response eventually. But we work very hard to make these meetings run well. And as much as I respect your opinion, I respectfully also disagree.
I appreciate it.
And it's not really the way that I want to run the meetings. Other comments before we take a informal vote on this?
I appreciate where Councilmember Bankert wants to acknowledge their comments. And I do appreciate that more to what you stated about it's hard sometimes when they say something. However, at the end of the day, we have to think of everybody's time that's spent. So I'm in agreement with keeping it as we are. And if there's something that we feel we need to address at the end, if they have to leave for whatever reason, the minutes are always available, the video's available. They can always come to us and find out what happened after the fact. So if they bring something to the table and they're not willing to wait until the end, how big of an issue was it really? Or, in the interest of time, if I had something that I really, really heartfelt about, I'm going to stick around to the end to see if somebody addresses it.
Well, I'm gonna add something to that I thought of, and I didn't put it in my notes, but many times a citizen will come to speak, to address the council, and only one council member knows that it's coming. Okay, so that one council member is prepared, already has an answer ready to go to give this person. However, it may not necessarily represent the views of the majority. And that's been one of my biggest fears. And that's what happened to us in the past, was that there were a few people that were getting attention over and over and over. And it would be, they were able to steer and control the meeting. And that's the last thing that I want, is for any citizen to come in and hijack the meeting. I do 100% believe that we should at least listen to them and then selectively determine whether it's some sort of an issue that needs to be addressed, or if it's not. one way or the other. Anyone else? Yes.
And I think, Dave, you brought up a very good point earlier, which was the citizens make their comments, which is great. And I hear it for the first time, which you just brought up again. And I may want to respond immediately and not really think it through. So I'll be honest with you, sometimes if somebody asks me something like that, and I'm ready immediately after that to respond to it, as opposed to by the time it gets to the end of the meeting, I may have thought it through a little bit more and chosen to not actually say anything at all at that point. Or hopefully what I say at the end of the meeting is a little bit more thought out based on the comments that the citizen made. So sometimes it is a benefit, I know with me personally, to calm down a little bit based on what somebody may have said and wait later to talk about it. That's just me.
One of the things that I do, the way that I conduct my meetings is I use other municipalities and the county as an example. We do that in not just the meetings, but we do that with a little bit of everything. Kyle, I'm sure that you've reached out to other municipalities and, hey, what are you guys doing? It's always a good practice to, I mean, we're actually watching what's happening with Indian Rocks Beach right now to find out what their future holds.
Right.
And so whenever I look at all the municipalities, and I surveyed the mayors on the Big C because I knew that this was coming up, I asked them, hey, how do you do it? What do you do? And pretty much everybody runs it the way that I'm doing this. If the majority of the council would like for me to change it, I will absolutely do that. But I ask each and every one of you to please allow me to continue because I think we're doing a great job.
Yeah, this isn't any reflection on your job that you're doing. And I think everyone's starting to go off what I proposed here. The thing again is you have the prerogative to address or not address. I mean, if you're a little bit hot-headed to address it, why would you address it? Okay, you would wait or maybe address it the following month. I don't think everyone's grasping what I'm trying to pull in here. All I'm asking is the council wants to address it right after citizens' comments, it should be addressed.
Thank you.
Would that also include if one council member comments on the citizen's comment, then can another council member comment on that other council member's comments? You know, I mean, are we opening up a?
Well, not directly.
That's what it
against
turns
me.
into.
Yeah.
What?
Well, and historically, that's what's happened.
Yes.
Is that whether, you're opening up a debate, the possibility for a debate. And I can assure you right now, if anybody here says something to a citizen that I strongly disagree with, I'm going to interrupt you and say that I disagree. So I don't want that. And I just don't think that it's healthy. So let's do a quick informal vote if there are no more comments about this. You okay with that?
Yeah.
All right. Frank?
I'm for it.
All right. Belinda? No?
Against. I'd like to leave it as we have it.
As we have it?
Leave it as we have it.
All right.
As is.
Okay. And I feel the same way. So I appreciate everyone's comments. And now let's move on to item number 6. Also on the agenda by Councilmember Bankert, discussion of the Norfolk pine tree at 804 Harbor Drive.
Yes, going back to the Primescape services that we did about 10 months ago, 11 months ago, the arborist that came out clearly says in there, reinspection is recommended in 1 year to monitor any changes. I know there was some follow-up on this. Have we reached any type of resolution with the landowner of that? Because I think it's under an LLC from what I've researched about the removal of that tree or anything.
So the Primescape, the one that the city solicited, I have a date of November 5th.
November
that
5th.
that was done.
Okay, I thought it was done in June. Oh, I'm sorry, that was the other the other guy had it done privately. Are we going to be doing another survey on that?
My thoughts at the time were, given the attention that's brought to the tree, that in a year, we would reassess.
Any movement from the owner on that property?
The owner was agreeable to letting anyone else remove the tree. He just didn't feel like he needed to be responsible for that tree that he considers is not a danger.
How about the nuisance ordinances we have? Because I went to the county, I guess it was November or October of last year. And the county more or less said, well, if you guys can't afford it, we could probably come out and remove it, because their council actually looked up our ordinances and said, I think I emailed you that. And I think I emailed our council that. And then they found out it was Bel Beach. He says, well, I don't think you got money problems. But so we're not coming out doing anything for you. But they said we believe your nuisance laws clearly show if that tree's possibly in harm of falling into an easement, into a house, then it should be removed. So I know this, you're saying that the owner says if we want to cut it down, we'll cut it, go get it cut down, but have we ever thought about citing him for it?
My opinion was, given the report that I was given, that the city solicited, that it was a slippery slope to enforce this tree as a dangerous tree, because I feel you could go around the city and plant a lot of trees and then we'd be in a different situation.
All right. So we're going to go through another hurricane season with it standing.
I know, me personally, I own a lot of properties, and someone's tree grows on my property, I have to cut it myself. They're not, and I have one right here in Largo. It's an adjacent property to an attorney, and she is not cutting the tree back. I have to do it. And I spend about $5,000 a year keeping this tree trimmed back. So, you know,
Well, it's not the trimming, Vice Mayor, it's the possible falling
Well,
on the houses.
same, that's the reason I trim it. That's the reason I choose to trim it, is to save my property. So if
Do
they
you go on
really,
their- Do you go on their property to trim it, or do you?
yes, because I
that's
know
not-
she's not going to.
But that's not
But if
permissible.
he's giving permission, then it would just be a simple phone call to whoever's house it might, you know, whoever's concerned about it. They could make a phone call to the owner and say, hey, we'd like to remove the tree. Do you mind? Get a written letter from him and go
He
remove
did
it.
say that he would sign a document that we
Yeah.
prepared it.
Now, let's go back a little bit. I thought that the last time we had a discussion about this, that you were going to reach out to neighboring, the people that surrounded that property and see if they would be interested in funding removal of the tree. I thought that's what does that sound familiar?
I remember saying that I would find out if it
I
would be
think we
permissible,
were
but
going
I
to try to
never.
get them to pay for it, and then you were going to expedite it if it could happen. If he would allow it and that they would.
I recommended that to some of the neighbors, what you just said, that I believe we're at the status, what you just said.
And I think that whenever I, did just a brief, hey, would you be willing to? I thought that they said that they would, because they all want it gone. And so I think the question is if they do agree with that, you said that the homeowner is not, he's not against you removing the tree. Is that right?
Correct.
So
So
what's the difference?
not to interrupt you, so could we just top it? You know what I'm saying? Cut half of it off?
I don't.
I don't think it would, you know what I'm
That's what
saying?
they did on my street. What, a neighbor had a really tall one. I
Yeah.
think it might snap.
I
and they
just want to be
burned it
really
down.
clear about the pronouns and antecedents we're using here about like we and us and they and them. What the manager has discussed is if the neighbors privately wish to amass a sum of money and arrange for somebody to do it, the property owner has indicated that, I would assume, provided they coordinate with him, that they can do as they well please, but he has no intention to do it. The we, us, them is not the city at this stage.
Yes,
I just need to make that clear for-
My apologies.
No, it's fine. It's not a problem. I
I mean,
just
we're,
need-
we're basically, we're looking for a liaison, somebody to say, or do you guys want to do this? And
And it's about 75 feet, let's say. So if we knock it down to 35 feet, I don't think that violates anything. is what it-
well,
Well,
I
I
would
think it
say
would
you're
be
still
back to
going to
someone
have a
that has to
dead
get a-
tree, though.
Yeah, but if it falls in the vacant lot. Then.
You
Well-
still just need to get a letter, I think, and whatever you guys, whatever that group of residents decide, I'm sure you could give them the phone number to reach out to the owner and.
Well,
get
I
a
think
letter.
that, okay, it's a little more complicated. I think that the property owner does not like those neighbors. And I think that if the city was doing it, he was okay with it. But does that ring a bell?
Yeah, he's been much more agreeable when I've communicated with him than when the neighbors directly
Right.
communicate.
I think your term not like, I think it might resonate to hate.
Is there a neighbor he likes?
I wasn't
Is
gonna,
there-
I wasn't gonna go that far, but,
Is there a neighbor that he likes that could reach out to him? I mean,
Well, if,
because I hate to put, I don't think the city should be in the middle of this.
Right, I think that's what Randy's saying, right?
Yeah,
Right, Randy?
yes,
That
Randy's.
we should
agreeing.
not
Yes,
be
sir.
involved.
can he mediate a letter though to get this done?
He can do as he wishes. I just, my concern here is,
I don't want to compromise the city, is what I'm saying.
yeah, I mean, my advice is unless we have a code enforcement action, which at this point, the manager has clearly communicated is not the direction the city's moving in, the city can facilitate by saying the residents, residents are interested in, or your neighbors are interested. Here's, do you have any objection to me sharing their contact information? Or is there a person I can put you in touch with to coordinate that, or put them in touch with on your behalf?
Mhm.
Maybe if he
I
feels
live
that
on
way
the
and he says,
street.
hey, I have a property manager or I have a lawyer, they can call my lawyer and figure out a time. I don't want to talk to those people. And I'm not putting words in that resident's mouth. I know nothing about that property owner or any of these people. I'm not characterizing anybody. But if he doesn't wish to, much in the same way the residents are somewhat suggesting they would like for the city manager to facilitate it, perhaps he has his own agent or somebody he can put them in touch with, and they can have their,
Mhm.
third parties talk to one another.
right, so.
Maybe Frank, you can, as the neighbor, make that phone call, right?
Yes, if I can get, can I?
I'm a little leery of our commissioner being a neighbor, a council member being a neighbor. I just can't.
Oh, he said he lived on the street. Okay.
My feeling, that's just not a full legal thing. It's more of an optics thing. The idea is, oh yeah, it's a neighbor, but they're the council member who's been very vocal on this issue. And it's going to feel, it may be characterized as more heavy handed than just like, oh, my neighbor. I recognize you wear both hats. I do want to sensitize you to those optics.
So,
Find someone else on your street.
Frank,
I got a chainsaw.
you added this onto the agenda. So, obviously you have you already have an open dialogue with the residents surrounding this tree.
And there's only one, I think he dislikes. So I think
I
that's
think
better.
there's two.
Well, harshly dislikes. The other one he just doesn't like, but I'm looking for guidance on, you know what I'm saying?
Right. Well, this is one of those, we had a situation, in fact, it was at the end of Vice Mayor Street with a cul-de-sac, and just went down there and said, hey, you guys come out here and just work it out. And they did. And they they're not 100% happy, but at least they were able to work something out.
This guy's in Vegas, you know what I'm saying? Was it hard for you to get in touch with him?
I got him with an email. He changes his
Okay.
number a lot.
Yeah, I can imagine. I'm going to run it by the citizens again and see where they want to go. I might be asking you for the email if that's okay.
This is what I would do if I were you. I would go to those residents that are concerned with the tree and first ask them if they would be willing to work together. to pay for the tree removal. And then I would find a non-associated resident, someone else, to make the phone call, and then you step away from it because it's just really not a city. As Randy has stated, it's not something we want to get too involved in because we don't want to appear to be pushing someone around.
Understood. And I'll just withdraw this part then.
What's that?
I'm just going to withdraw this part from this agenda then. I mean, it doesn't need a vote or anything like that.
Well, we weren't voting on it. You were just, it's a discussion item. There's a problem and this is a work session. We can talk about anything. Yes.
If the neighbors who are complaining about it have been told that they can take it down and that the owner says that's okay, and maybe this is a question for Randy or it's the lawyer and me, can they not complain if the tree falls on their house? You know, if they were told they could cut it down, but they don't, and then it falls on their house.
Well, they would still
I'm
be
not going to
liable.
opine on private property owners' rights or defenses. You know, much in the same way that the commentary has thus far been, this absent code enforcement action, the city doesn't have a role in this. In a lot of these instances, and the mayor has offered other examples where we've asked people to either be good neighbors or work it out themselves. If they have private causes of action they wish to bring or can render, and I'm not suggesting there are or are not, but that's for them to decide. And in the same vein, if they feel that they are, you know, waiving some right, defense or power, that's for them to analyze. I won't opine on it.
Okay. Before we end this, does anyone have any comments on this agenda item? Okay, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this as a segue only for the Henrys that came in earlier. I know that they're not here, but they may look at the video. And what I'm going to ask from City Attorney Mora is just an update on the situation that you're working on with the tower. Is there anything that you can share with us at this time, or are we still where we were the last time we received an email about it?
So for the benefit of all and to make sure we're all on the same page, last Monday, I believe it was, I transmitted or maybe it was Sunday night, I transmitted a memorandum. It was Monday because I needed to talk to Kyle. I transmitted a memorandum last Monday night to you. I want to say it was in the neighborhood of, I know it was more than 10 pages. I can't remember if it was 20. But it was a lengthy memorandum analyzing, providing the chronology of events as best understood based on staff records and otherwise, providing an analysis of the federal regulatory landscape, the case law interpreting it, the state landscape, case law or absence thereof interpreting it, and our local ordinances. And then how does that all align with where we stand? And the Cliff Notes version of that for all was private property owners have rights and we have to reconcile those rights. And this is two things can be true. And since we seem to be very comfortable invoking Indian Rocks Beach tonight, I will invoke Indian Rocks Beach and its debate and discussion on short-term rentals as an example, where certain property owners say, well, what about my rights? I invested in a quiet home on a cul-de-sac. Now I live next to a hotel or a motel, and there are some property owners that feel that way. And other property owners say, this home has been in my family for years, or I recently acquired it, and why I acquired it doesn't matter. It's my property, and I wish to use it in this way that state law allows me to use. And those feel mutually exclusive, but the law supports both. And we have to find a way to balance those interests as best we can as regulators. And so where the landscape stands presently is, while I certainly recognize, sympathize with, and understand the articulated concerns about safety, aesthetics, consistency, et cetera, as it relates to the antenna structure operated or that exists at 105 8th for amateur antenna radio operation. The law also provides a property owner who wishes to engage in that hobby or operation, as long as it is on an amateur basis, which there's every evidence thus far that that's what's going on, that zoning alone, just simply saying, well, this is a residential area, you can't do it, is not adequate. And the memorandum spoke extensively about the specific fact finding that needs to go into that, the effort to negotiate and reach a reasonable accommodation, which is terminology you usually see associated with ADAs and then those other type actions, but taking that same paradigm and applying it here, a reasonable accommodation requires you to actually delve into the very fact-specific scenario being proposed here and understand that. And so what was done, the memo concluded with a bulleted list of the kinds of questions that we would seek, and the restatement that the property owner's lawyer and the city attorney, me, both agree that a permit is required for this structure regardless. Obviously, this is not the kind of structure you permit on a regular basis. The usual paradigms may not fully apply as to how what the form requires, et cetera. And so while there are certain elements that will be required, we need to know where it's going to be and its dimensions. There are some added questions that we've articulated by, I want to say it was by Thursday of last week, I emailed his attorney with communicating those questions and some more, indicating that his administrative contact was Manager Riefler. I haven't had a chance yet to see if he's contacted Mr. Riefler, but thus far not. I was going to ask him tonight and then follow up with his attorney in a call tomorrow if that had not happened. I had indicated in that email that it would be preferable if they are submitting a permit to do so post haste and preferably in the next 14 days, or at least explain why that may not be a feasible time based on what they need to compile or otherwise, so either do it in this time or at least let us know what time we can reasonably expect and why, so that there is some motion forward. And I'd communicated that to you, Mr. Member Pinkard, that day. And so I do know the Henrys came in and introduced themselves briefly to me and spoke with the mayor. From what I've overheard, there was some concern. Is there any possibility that this could exist in that an antenna structure could exist in this neighborhood from a legal standpoint? I'm not saying that it is a done deal. Is there any version of this where this is possible? Yes, there is. Does it have to look like what's there presently? I don't know, because that's part of what this process is designed to determine. For example, if his amateur operation requires him to go to X feet and his roof is X feet -3, is there a reason? Help me to understand why it's not reasonable to say, affix this to the roof or affix this to some other element on the property. And again, those questions have been posed. We're waiting for those answers, and that's where we stand working through it. I understand just because this is now being addressed in a public meeting and there are public records that have circulated in the form of communications with you. I know I've addressed this with some of you who I had the opportunity to speak with individually. I also want to address the point that this posture is not because of some fear of litigation. My practice regularly involves litigation. Frankly, I prefer it to late night meetings. But litigation, because of what I do here, I also know, and because I am a litigator, I know what this looks like on both sides. And I know what it is to litigate on an undeveloped record or on knowing what the case law is and saying, well, pardon the language, damn the torpedoes, we're forging ahead regardless. If I can set you up for a better defensive position, if we even get to a defensive position, that's in better service of the client on a risk management standpoint and as just a general litigator. The other idea that their legal counsel has bullied us, I want to make it clear in the record, as I said in the memo, their legal counsel, while he does have a position that may differ from some in the community, has been a consummate professional in his dealings with me. We've had candid exchanges. He sent me case law, I sent him case law, and we've discussed our varying points and by and large have reached agreements, at least on what the general overarching legal principles are. What that looks like in execution, it may be different. And again, we're navigating that. Thus far, there has not been in our exchanges a bunch of posturing or, guerrilla chest beating on I'm gonna crush you and you will see. It's, can we find a solution here? I think we can bring this in for a landing. My client needs to make better permitting submissions. Absolutely. We're prepared to do that. We just need to know what the city wants. So the goalpost doesn't keep moving. I'm not alleging, and they haven't accused us of moving the goalpost, just let's have shared expectations and get to a finish line. And then determine if something can be reached or not. So that's, I know I've kind of rambled at this point, so I'll stop, but that's where we stand. I'm happy to answer any more targeted questions if you have them.
Well, 9 years ago when I moved here, he had a antenna probably about 2 widths of those doors there up on the side of his house.
Yes, sir.
But it was a very flimsy antenna. So
Okay.
if it took off in the wind, you know what I'm saying, it would do minimal damage.
Okay.
Where this is a tower,
Understood.
which has got the neighbors upset because that's going to projectile. And both of you, and I said this before, both of you guys did a marvelous, fabulous job at the hearing in front of the magistrate.
Yes, sir.
And even Mr. Pinholster noted that his tower was could withstand 100-mile-an-hour winds, which I got up and said, well, I think Pinellas County wants it at 140. So there in itself, it should be removed. But I understand your whole process. You're dotting the i's, crossing the t's, because if this does go in front of the FCC, federal or whatever, you're going to have to make sure that we gave him every possible doorway to come in.
Right.
And when we shut him because of this.
If we do, yes, sir.
Yes.
And I would submit to you again that while I'm suggesting that there is a possibility and not necessarily a definite probability, and I just don't know, because I know it's cliched, but I don't know what I don't know yet. I'm waiting for particulars before I could render any opinion. But just because something may be allowed doesn't mean it needs to be allowed in the same manner that it is now. I will say that as a testament to the civil dealings between the parties, his attorney has represented to me, and at this point, I have no evidence to the contrary, that antenna has not been vertical in 2023 and likely really the last 2 months of 2022 as well, and would not be going up until we could resolve this so as not to antagonize the situation or create additional enforcement issues. Mayor, I couldn't help but overhear, though I was working on another matter, that the Henrys had suggested that the precise location of the tower may have moved recently, possibly closer to the home, though perhaps still on the side.
Yes.
That may be in direct response to my communication to his attorney, which was consistent with the memorandum saying, one of the questions he had was, while we develop a proposal, what is permitted as of right generally? And I said, again, I'm not a building official. I'm not the manager. I can't say if you do this, it's fine. But looking at our code, one of the elements is the side setback, and it would need to be X amount of feet from the side setback. And so perhaps that move, and I don't know this, I've not spoken to his attorney. This is pure speculation, but it seems consistent with the fact that I make this transmission on Thursday. We are here Monday, and it seems to have moved away from the fence and towards the structure. I don't know about footings and concretes and how it was moved and what was moved, but it seems that it's moving away from the setback, again, consistent with the direction we're moving in of achieving compliance, which is what his counsel stated. To be clear that it is presently on a cranking mechanism. I've heard the residents' concerns. I don't like to qualify them as complaints, so they're concerns that, it seems that when he is operating this, he needs the assistance of or employs, for whether he needs it or not, the assistance of youth, his teenage grandson friends, people he hires. I don't know. It's sort of besides the point. And there's a concern of, are those people always going to be around when it needs to come down? If there's some kind of exigent circumstance, an unexpected storm or something that requires its coming down when that time comes. And those are all things that we can address. But presently it is more akin in its current configuration. It's really more akin to a utility tower that's sort of attached to a shed or something, not a tower, sorry, utility ladder or something of the sort. That it's a large aluminum structure for sure that is slightly, maybe incrementally above the fence line if you're driving in the front, but it's not teetering over a home or a property line at this stage.
And that's what I've asked the neighbors is just notify me if you see the tower go up, and then I will notify city manager.
And I do plan to contact his counsel tomorrow. Again, I was waiting to see if there'd been some contact. I just didn't have an opportunity to talk to Kyle today because of my other caseload. But given that I have not yet received an email, and I also have to check my spam because he has an unorthodox email address that sometimes gets routed there. But by tomorrow, I'll confirm whether there's just confirming the receipt of my email, if nothing else. But the actions seem to be consistent with that.
So you don't know if he's going to submit one within 2 weeks or not, because you're not at that point.
I just haven't heard back from him. I again, to the extent I have any confirmation of the receipt of my email, it appears to be that action, but that's speculation. I would like to talk to him and see where they're at and if they take issue with anything that I didn't send him the full memo, though of course it's a public record. I distilled his concerns and addressed those in the email at that time.
Council, I would like to apologize. I let us run long during this before the break. We're up to general business, but what I'd like to do is take 5 minutes.
Yeah, I know.
Can I
you
make
got
a
number
quick
7 too.
comment about that, or can we still comment on this, on this?
We can come
topic
right
when we come
back.
Okay,
I
all
just
right.
owe everyone a break
Okay.
and then we'll come right back. You okay with that?
Yeah, number 7 though, we still with it. Like, and that was going to lead into what he was talking about.
Good to go?
Yes, sir.
All right. Oh, we're still waiting on Patty.
Looks like it has
Whatever makes you happy, honey.
Website.
Yes, exactly.
Ellis Coastal Decor. Okay.
So we were back to Vice Mayor Shirley. She had questions or comments on.
Yeah, just a couple of comments regarding the tower, and that is, first, Randy, thank you so much for all the information. It was a lot to digest, but very helpful. I was receiving several emails, and your email helped clear up some things, and I appreciate that. I want to be aware of property owners' rights and very cautious not to overreact with the residents reaching out to us. Oftentimes, we want to please the resident that's complaining or reaching out to us with their concerns and not really take a step back and look at the overall picture. So I just want to caution everyone on that. And when I was thinking about some of the concerns I received from adjacent residents, I also got some comments from other residents that are adjacent to this property that had no concerns at all. So there's both sides. But it brought me to think about the sign ordinance that we just approved to place a 35-foot flagpole in people's front yards. And I want to be certain that we have thought that through and we have a permitting process for those flagpoles and what our expectations are of them. Because this, to me, is no different than that flagpole. Just food for thought. Don't need to discuss it right now, but first thing that came to my mind when I looked at this antenna. So that was all.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, any other discussion on item 6 before we move to item 7, not general business? Nope. All right. Item 7, modify city code, section 2-335, appeal. Regarding an appeal of the city manager's decisions to add must be done in writing and served by certified mail. This was added by Councilmember Bankard. Mr. Bankard.
Yeah, this actually goes back to number 6, or not number 6, the tower discussion. And when I was talking to our city attorney, I was saying, well, how did he appeal this? And he said, well, he sent some email to the city clerk. And I think the city attorney just gave me more ammo because he says he has to check his spam tonight because of certain emails. This poor soul works hard enough. I mean, whether she has to check her spam every day or whatever, I don't check my spam. I don't know about you guys or whatever, but I can't believe we don't have a better system of serving for an appeal when the city manager denies something on the board. So I'm not exactly 100% sure it should be under section 2-335. But he just shook his head, so I know I'm wrong. But what I'm saying is there should be a system that we have if the board or the city of a board or the city manager denies something, there should be a way that it gets appealed in a fashion that we know about it. Not that, oh, well, I sent an email, a month ago or whatever. And then now you're searching your email and some spam accounts actually delete on their own after 15, 30 days or whatever. So I just think it would be a proper way of doing business.
So I understand how there was a slight mishap recently and something was overlooked or it wasn't picked up in a timely basis. And I agree with you on that we need a better way of doing it.
Thank you.
I think, I don't know if really certified mail is a requirement because some people just never go to the post office and don't want to deal with that. But I think that we could certainly have, just like we have a permitting process where you have specific forms that you
I'm fine
you
with
have to
that.
complete, we should have an appeal form that you complete and you submit and you have the city clerk sign off that, hey, I received this, and then you give that person a copy. And then therefore now you've got a tracking mechanism, and it's something that just like every other form we do, I think it's just something that was missing from our collection of documents.
I'm in total agreement with what you just said there. It's,
Does that sound acceptable? Rather than changing letter, well, I think we would still.
you just said I was wrong anyway where the code was, so.
Yeah.
it wouldn't- Yeah,
Yeah, so the reason I shook my head in regards to this is appeals appear in your code in a lot of different places and in different forms. I do want to be very clear, especially because you've expressed some concern about this in the past, Councilmember Bankert. As it relates to appeal of a code enforcement magistrate or code compliance special magistrate order, there's a very distinct process for that.
Right.
Set forth by statute and otherwise. So notices of appeal for a special magistrate's decision are already dealt with. The appeal as it related to the manager's denial of a permit in this particular context really comes from your Board of Adjustment code provisions, where it sets their powers and duties, and one of them is under 9462 sub B and C. One of their powers is to hear and decide an appeal from an administrative decision or order made by a city official where there is alleged to be an error in the order or decision in the enforcement of this article. And that's what was really being invoked here. I found an error, or what I believe to be an error in the denial of this permit. And then the next provision in C is the city manager shall receive and process each appeal to the board. And then it goes on to say, within, not talking about days, but just disposition and blah, 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 blah. I think the mayor has touched on something that could be a solution here without the need to go on a first and second reading of shall by registered mail. The only thing that I would suggest is, and Kyle and I can work on this, is to the extent there are, whether it's part of a permitting package or other things where we regularly communicate a decision, having rider language, any appeal of this decision shall be submitted on a form to be produced by City Hall or made available at City Hall. And, adding some language to the city website on if you wish to file an appeal, please use this form, disseminating that form in that kind of way so people are aware of its existence and not. I would hate for us to be in a position, and I certainly would, find it problematic if we say, oh, you didn't find our special secret form without necessarily making people aware that it exists and how to access it. If I'm speaking without the manager having added some input on this, I was shaking my head about that. That was the provision that got them here. There's various appeals referenced in your code, and that was, when we talked about a code review, one of those things that we would want to harmonize if we did get to that point. And I know the manager's got some future vision on what that might look like. But that's what I wanted to add as far as why I was shaking my head, and also what potential solutions might exist, subject, of course, to administration's input.
well, I like the way the mayor put it, and I don't know why we couldn't just attach it to a denial.
Mhm.
When this form must be filled out.
It's just part of the
Yeah.
process. Just keep it as simple as possible.
Yeah. But have it noted, needs to be the proper way.
Does that address
Would
your
that-
concerns?
Being that, there's some parts of the administrative appeals discussed in the code, would that hold up though, if we just present it in that way with a denial? And we provide the means of.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly goes beyond what we're doing presently. I don't know, and in as much as we're sort of now signaling to people beyond, here's your denial, and if you want to appeal it, figure it out, because we don't give legal advice. I don't give legal advice. Somebody says, what do I do if I want to challenge it? The code addresses appeals of managers' decisions. Do with it what you wish. And so in that regard, I think it would be sufficient. Again, I would want to make sure that we're checking the notice box of letting people know, and that's what we're talking about doing. Again, I wouldn't reinvent the wheel. I would look to other communities and say, hey, do any of you have, especially because we serve about a dozen, seeing if anybody has a sample that they use in their communities to trigger that. If not, we can develop one. It's not that difficult. I would still submit that I want to be clear, what we're really talking about here is the notice of the appeal. It's not necessarily, they may thereafter have additional items they wish to supplement with and, and that what we really want to address is give me the notice. What was, fields we would want, for example, by whom was the decision issued? Because it's not necessarily only the manager. What was the decision date? What was the content of it? Attach a copy of the decision you seek to appeal if it is in writing, et cetera, et cetera.
I'm a bit confused. Is the appeal of a decision on a permit request? Is that, I'm confused because of the, there's a standard permitting process. It's just the process, right? So they didn't like the answer they got from you on something you denied on their permit. So they resubmit. I'm not.
In theory, yes. I mean, you can revise and.
I don't know. I'm not understanding why there's so much conversation about this appeal and why they're appealing when they just would resubmit and come in and talk to you.
Well, that is a preferred solution at first, but if you reach a terminal point where, but I want X, and the city manager is saying, I've read our code, you're not allowed to have X, and say, well, I read your code and I think you can, I think you're reading it wrong. And we had that situation, not just in the context of the antenna structure, but another property where we were talking about, another property where there was an interpretation relative to what could be built over grade or over the first floor. And we, staff was reading it one way and the applicant and their agent were reading it another and took it to the board and said, I think your manager's reading your code wrong. I think your code is being administered wrong.
Building code
And
needs a lot of
so,
attention.
and again, those issues certainly sensitize us to those instances, as with the more recent change on the variance, not variance, but the setback in Bellevue Estates. That's an example of where we've discovered an issue and we need to address it. But until that issue is addressed, sometimes their only recourse is not to revise. No matter how many times they revise, they're not going to be, if the interpretation is, you can't have this, well, I think I can. And then, so that's why you get appeal. It's not frequent. I mean, maybe I just am a magnet for them. You've had 2 in my tenure, but outside of that, it's not common. But you do want to make sure if you're having the process that it's administered consistently.
And
Yeah.
this is dealing with just the city manager saying, no, the only way you'd ever get this is through a variance.
Or the code changing.
Or code changing. And then they want to challenge it without going through the variance process. And that's the appeal we're referring to. Is that right?
Yes, except to say that, again, the scope of the appeal is they allege that there's an error in the order or decision in the enforcement of the article. So the basis for the appeal is not just like, I don't like the answer I got. It's, I think he's doing it wrong. I think they did the wrong thing. If Kyle opined tomorrow that the only kind of pool somebody could have is an above ground kiddie pool, somebody's like, well, that doesn't seem right. And he's like, well, that's just how I'm reading it. Somebody would go through that kind of process to pick an absurd thing that could get you to a real result.
Okay. Any more comments or questions on this topic? No?
Just because we're talking about the code, just in my, 4 months of being city manager, there's a lot of issues. Well, I wouldn't say issues, but just questions with the code. And I think it would be beneficial to form another review committee, at least with our residents. Because I know we talked about like a major overhaul, but that had a monetary, like a price to it. But, in the past 5 years since I've been here, code review boards have been formed and different areas of code were selected to be discussed. And there's some points I'd like to bring up and look at.
We've done it once on the council and once, no, you were on the council the first go round. I was a sideliner, and then the second time we did it together. But it's probably, how long has it been?
I don't know. I thought Lynn Reeves had it done, but what's happening is they're focusing on bushes and grass and no one has any construction experience. They're reaching out to residents to read line by line through this code. If we're going to do it, we need to hire a professional who can help us with construction code and talk about, are we going to put in some architectural design parameters and things like that? We ended up with this, your pool couldn't be higher than the grade of the road, just stupid things that keep getting changed by having the residents do it. And makes absolutely no sense when you have your finished floors at 14 feet and your pool's at 0, it's just makes absolutely no sense why those codes have been changed and modified like that. And I think that if we're going to do it, we need to do it right and spend a little money.
I would suggest too, as you talk about that, you may wish to consider the paradigm of having your code of ordinances reviewed one way
Right.
and your land development code reviewed another. When you treat them as similar, you're right, there's a very big distinction between, do we want to limit the skate park hours from 8 to 12 or only allow only rollerblades? And like, these are the kinds of I'm not trying to trivialize all the legislative, but those are very distinct from, what grade is and how you're defining whether you're measuring from the crown of the road or, from BFE and all those kinds. That's hyper technical where your land development code goes. And also land development code may, because it's land use, may come with attendant issues of legal impacts of, we're down zoning this, and I'm not suggesting anybody's trying to propose that, but, land development codes can have more collateral impacts than changing purely legislative regulations on how other parts of the city are administered. So when you talk about a code review, most codes are subpart A is here are the laws you can break, and subpart B is, and here's how you get to use your land. And so that is where communities have endeavored to do a code review. Sometimes they bifurcate those two.
Okay,
Which I highly recommend.
what's that?
I highly recommend separating the two.
And we've discussed this. I think that we kicked it down the road a little bit just because we wanted these two to settle in
Mhm.
and deal with the immediate problems. And then we go back and we focus on that. And what I recommend is pretty much in alignment with Randy, is that we tackle sections, not the whole thing. We just focus on a couple of areas and knock it out, perfect it, make sure that it doesn't impact other areas, and then just a little along instead of all at once. I think that it's probably too much to digest if we do it all at one time. Thoughts? Kyle?
Do you want me to start looking at through the county if there's any consultation or, assistance they can provide, or rather than going private with, we're talking land use codes and construction codes, and just to get some options, because yeah, she does bring up a good point that, average resident does not have very much experience in the language of those codes.
You're right about that. We're great at changing rules about shrubs and hedges and
That's the entire code review was every meeting about, is it a bush or is it grass or is it a tree or is it, and I'm like, oh my gosh. How about the League of Cities
I
to
was thinking
see if
same
they
thing.
have, someone who can assist us with the construction land development code
Good idea.
right there. And then if not, then we might have some resources.
There are some, I do have some, just from my experience being the floodplain administrator for the city. Some parts of the flood code I'd like to have considered, so there are other parts.
okay.
So I'm kind of looked at, I believe in that fashion that the CAC could operate in that way as a code review board, because it's not land development. Or am I incorrect in that flood code?
Flood code is in your land development
It
code,
is,
I believe,
okay.
and you would have to, on top of any consistency determination with your comp plan, we definitely would want the planner reviewing for consistency with county elements and all of that.
Okay.
And I'd love to add some feedback to, on the flood. If you're looking at flood, there's some things we could do on the lots that are waterfront.
Mhm.
Add some code compliance that's not there, that new development is not doing, that they could manage the runoff from their property and their roof line right out to the
intercoastal rather than onto our streets, that we're still managing it on the streets and.
Or
things
in your
that-
pool.
Yeah, and no one, I mean, it's a very easy thing to do during construction, but it's not in our code. And so no one does it because it costs a few bucks.
Right. And I think Mike Kelly had mentioned that there was definitely something with the pool code. I didn't quite understand it, but
The 18 inches above the elevation of the crown of the road. So, yeah, so right now where we're at, we're doing the comprehensive plan with the planning and zoning board, so we have to get through that.
all right.
After that, it would be the sign ordinance. So then I guess after that.
All right. Any other comments on Vice Mayor Shirley's comment? No? What's the plan of attack on this? Obviously, we're waiting for this one phase to finish, and then what's next after that?
We're talking about the comp plan?
Yes.
Okay, so right now we're working on the advertisement. Do we have the dates that I cannot remember? No, we have not.
So no,
So we're drafting
the advertisement and the ordinance, yep.
Okay, so as soon as that is done, then it'll serve as our public hearing for the the approval from the Land Development Board,
Okay.
and then it'll come to you guys.
All right. And then, well, any other questions or on that at all, or can we move on to general business? Everybody good with that? Okay. Before I start, does anyone have any general business they would like to discuss? No?
I don't.
Okay. So I've been thinking about many things. And first, I want to say, I don't want this. I don't use it. I can't make myself learn an iPad. I'm great with computers, but this is not what I want to do for the next 2 years. So I'm gratefully returning it, and I don't know what we're going to do with them, but I look and I don't see anyone
I
else's.
use
either.
mine.
Are you using yours?
Yeah, because
Okay.
I don't
return
allow
mine.
any city business on any of my devices. It goes right here.
Okay, all right. Well, I just use mine for email, and I'll construct a document or something, but everything's being archived, and Patty can retrieve it if we ever get any records requests, but I have no use for it. And I like the fact that we have all of these documents. In fact, I purposely did not pick up my packet, and I wanted to see how I could do on my laptop, and it actually worked out well. I write notes on this, and I view the document here, and I'm okay with that. That being said, how many of these have been turned in already?
I think you'll be the third.
Okay. Should we liquidate them? Does the staff have a use for them? I don't know.
The good news is they were paid for from the Department of Justice grant for COVID.
Okay.
So it was the idea as I sold it, we could use them if we ever were in a situation again that we had to be mobile or at home. We could hold meetings using devices.
Okay. Well, is it all right if I store mine here then?
Sure.
Okay, great.
Weren't we supposed to go paperless and what was it, Windows 95 when that came out?
Yeah, I hear you. Okay, so the next thing that I wanted to bring up, I'm trying not to keep everybody too late. I still owe you guys a marina plan, and we haven't done it. I have told Kyle that I was going to get with him. I just have not had time. And then, of course, we had the situation in the family, and I appreciate everyone reaching out and sending their condolences. I'll get there, okay? And we will have this conversation, and then we'll give you something to look at and debate over. The next thing is, as you know, I'm on the Big C, and what I also attend the Mayor's Council of Pinellas County meetings, and there's other councils and committees and whatever that I could be involved in. What I have discovered, and this is probably on me, was whenever times were hard and we weren't very happy, we voted to do term limits. And before I go any further, I am not asking for term limits to be changed for me, but I am asking this council to consider adding a third term to whoever is next. And the reason why is because all of the Mayor's Council of Pinellas County, the Big C, Suncoast League of Cities, I believe there's in the same shape, is that I can't serve as an officer. And they want me to be more involved, and I can't do it. And so what happens is I really don't have as much influence on other communities and the county as I would if I were able to serve as an officer. And unfortunately, whenever you're a two-termer, I think this city is probably learned that there's probably not going to be many surprises. This community is probably going to watch and watch somebody serve on the council before they elect a mayor, unless it's somebody that's already served and then they come back in. But in my case, I served on the council. Now I'm the mayor, but I'm not eligible for anything outside of right here because they all know that I'm terming out at the end of this term. And so I'm not asking for any action items or anything tonight, but I'm asking for all of you to kind of consider this situation, and are we doing the very best for our community that we can? Because what I see is that other communities are having more influence over the whole area, whereas we're not really considered anything because of our size, and also because I can't serve on as an officer, and that's how you make changes. So something to consider. I know that it would have to be on it would have to be on a ballot during an election to change our charter again. Something else that speaking of elections and our charter and the way that we handle things, I know that we're on this 3-year thing, and I'm beginning to wonder if it's too expensive. If we would save money if we just ran our elections with the general elections rather than this oddball, in March and 1 year, and then like maybe if we had 4-year terms instead of 3-year terms, and we had an election every 2 years, one during the regular general election, and then we had one during the midterms, and we just piggybacked off of that to save money. Just again, things that I've been thinking about now that I know what I know. And that's really about it. Yes.
I have always thought personally that term limits were a good thing. And I always was thinking that on a federal government level, when you see people that are in those positions for eternity, it appears, and for some reason they keep being reelected, and it almost looks like they're not sure what they're doing anymore. Just saying. I think at a city level, and I heard this guy on the radio just driving home one day, and he said, I used to be for term limits. Now it doesn't make any sense to me, because clearly if somebody's not doing the job properly, you vote them out. It's not difficult to do that. So I just pegged over to the other side. I am 100% against term limits. I've had more than a few citizens talk to me specifically about this issue, so I should have brought it up. I forgot. I think, I guess my first question is, when do we, if we want to change the charter, how ahead of time do we have to submit whatever we need to submit to make it go before a vote? Does anybody know that? Answer.
I can't tell you a precise deadline as it varies by election. It's
Okay.
usually a good, my recollection, the last time I did so, it was like for a March election, it was like December 15th.
Oh, okay, so we have plenty.
You know, in terms of getting
I thought it was like-
information out. And before that December 15th, we have to have had a vote on the ordinance, and it's been in the form of ordinance and resolution on, do we have this? And then if we do have it, what does the ballot language read? So there's definitely lead time.
Right,
It's not something you decide, you know, a month or two before the election, but
okay,
you do, it's also not a year out either.
right. So I just wanted to make that comment. I agree with you 100%. I think it just makes sense. And I think clearly at a city level, if somebody's not doing the job that the citizens feel that person is doing, and they run again, they're not going to win. It's just that simple.
I disagree with that.
Why is that?
Well, as Nancy Pelosi, who's one of my least favorite women, said when AOC was elected, if you put a glass of water on the ballot in that district, it would get elected. And is the populace isn't in tune. They don't look at the numbers that come to the polls, less than 40%, sometimes 20%. There's enough people to serve. And I think there should be a refreshing of a cabinet, of a council, of a Congress, of a Senate every few years. I was totally against term limits. I felt exactly you did 20 years ago, but how the hell can a person like Nancy Pelosi stay in office this many
Well, I'm
years?
talking about-
How can people like Joe Biden, who's never done
Federal.
anything? What I'm saying, it's federal, but it's the same thing. Government starts at the local lowest level, okay, and then it resonates up. That's why I was so concerned about going into a bond issue. Are we getting into the big government by now? You know, going in debt. I think everybody in Bel Air Beach should have to serve on council for one term. It should be like, it should be like purgatory. You know, it's like purgatory, okay?
Yeah.
For those Catholics, they understand what I'm talking about.
My understanding is historically, there was a time when this city could hardly even get anybody
Right.
to fill a position. And so somebody would be in that position and they wanted out, and they were told, somebody tapped them on the shoulder and said, you know, nobody's signing up for this. Would you do it another term? So I don't think there's enough people here that really want to do it.
Well, that's my point. And there's not enough people that go to the polls. So you have to get people involved.
I think
is
the
what I'm
last
saying.
time there were a lot of people that went to the.
Yeah,
polls.
and look at the time before that, and the time before that, and the time before that.
Right.
Yeah. There was a lot of influx of money last time too.
I
mean,
see both sides.
Mhm.
I mean, I definitely do, because when you're new on council, it probably takes you a year to gear up, right?
Mhm.
So there's a big learning curve, and
Sure.
so so you lose a lot of time in the beginning. I just had this conversation with my son-in-law today. We're talking about term limits, and I'm in support of it, but I think we've limited it too short. I think with this last review, we did, you know, it was when we voted in term limits and the last charter review. And I think 2 terms seem like a good idea, but I think if you've served on council and then you're in a mayor's position, then that changes things. The learning curve's not accounted for, just some things that, you know, maybe we should take a look at it, is all I'm saying. I'm not sure how I feel about it, but I see both sides, right? Because what happens in 6 years, you know, you're on council for 6 years, Leslie, and no one steps up to take your spot, and we can't get that chair filled. I mean, I really don't know what's going to happen in that election when we can't fill the chair.
But how many,
So-
when Mr. Gunn left, how many people applied to sit on council? We had, what, 4?
But they didn't have to run an election. That was a little different. When you had
Yeah,
to
but
run an election,
they
it's a
still
whole
stepped
different.
up to serve, you know, and I think I don't know. like-
So this is kind of my take on it, is that, all right, let's just say you're serving on the council all right, and is your first time, you're going to be on the council with some people that have already been on there for at least a year or two. All right, and so you have to start building a relationship with them. Well, then you run for mayor later and it starts all over again. You don't know what you're doing whenever you are now going out, because you understand how this council works, but you don't understand how everything else works. And so you go out there, and Leslie can testify to this because she's done it. You start building relationships and you start figuring out how people work and how they operate. And once you establish those relationships, you have more power to benefit your community than you do just by yourself. And so it's something that I would seriously like everyone to consider. What I will say is that if we decide to do this, I would like to make sure that I am not eligible, that it would be this new, the charter would go into effect as I left. And because it's the right thing to do.
Wouldn't that impact everybody right now, city attorney, since they were all elected under its ongoing charter?
Short answer, I'd have to look at the language. I wasn't sensitized that we'd be having this discussion that way. We would have to look at that language. Of course, when you're drafting charter amendments, you're legislating, and we can write it how we want to write it, based on, and ultimately what, if you seek to have it approved, what you think would be more favorable that way as well. But not necessarily. It would in part be how we structure it and what we're looking at. I'm not intimately familiar with, beyond the third term limitation, what your term limit language presently looks like.
Okay.
But I didn't even think of what you brought up earlier, which was the inability of somebody who's in their final term is highly unlikely to be elected for a position within the county, an officer position.
Don't say within the county.
Not the county, yeah.
Just say as an officer within, because I don't want anyone to think that,
No, I get- you're
you know what I'm saying?
right, saying, yeah.
Uh,
So, but there's some limitations there, or just human nature. When people are making a recommendation for somebody to
well,
take on an
normally
officer
you're a
position.
treasurer, then you're secretary, and then
Right.
you're the chair or the president. And
Mhm,
1 or 2 year terms, I would not be eligible at all.
right,
And so, and not only that, but they didn't know who I was whenever I
Right.
first started. So really, a second term would be the only way to, for Bel Air Beach to be fairly represented out throughout the county on these various committees. Would you agree with that, Leslie?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I know that the mayor's luncheon I went to, there were some county commissioners there, and they're a good contact for us. I mean, but again, you've got to, if you're just a year in and you don't know what you don't know, you've got
right.
to, it takes time to figure out your footing and what
Right.
you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I will add that the extra year, because if you remember, I was put on the big C the year before
Right.
this term began. It actually did give me a leg up, whereas someone new coming in, a new mayor, they don't know anyone. And so it actually bought me an extra year, and we've made quite a bit of progress. So it's just something to think about. And I know that the size of the term also could possibly be impacted if you wanted to run elections during a regular election rather than I don't know what the implications would be for poor Patty, but not bad then.
And Mayor, I haven't looked at all the bills filed this session. I know that the last 2 sessions, the legislature has tried to compel all municipalities to conform that way. So, and again, I'm not suggesting that will happen this session, but we always have that added fun element of how we'll reconcile that if that fiat should come down from Tallahassee.
Yeah, and these are the same people that are wanting to bring in partisanship.
And
Which will totally
and
wreck.
enhanced financial disclosures and
Yes.
all.
Oh, yeah.
This is going to be a very interesting session for municipalities, and you'll be getting memoranda from me shortly on where the bills are standing now that we're about 2 and 3 weeks into session.
Yep. Okay, I think that was all I had, other than Kyle, when do we begin the official budget season?
The end of this month, I turn into to Heather, what the budget that I prepared, and she kind of puts it all together. I believe I'll have to check the calendar. I don't have it on me right now, but I believe the start of May
Okay,
that I'm gonna issue that to you and start holding meetings individually.
okay, great. And this is it, and then everybody can go home. I keep promising you updates on the beach nourishment and what's going on with it. I met with Kelly Levy, who is in charge of, I think, Public Works Director.
Yeah, I talked to her.
Okay, so I spoke to her, had a long meeting with her, and I had Pat and Bill with me, and
Is this Pinellas County?
yes,
Okay.
yeah. She is on board with the county fully funding the project if we don't get a positive answer from the Army Corps of Engineers and various people in DC. A few,
Right. When is that deadline? Because isn't that approaching, or hasn't that approached?
there's no deadline.
Because they start moving that equipment in.
We're not even fighting for a deadline right now. We're fighting just to ever get it
Right.
again. Okay.
Mhm.
And so we're already 2 years out because there's been no plans. All right. So we're going to have to go through at least 2 more storm seasons before we see
So you're saying there's nothing going on
there's
this year?
nothing going on
This year.
On Sand Key Island.
On this
Nothing.
year, because people keep saying, is it going to happen?
It's not going to
And
happen.
I keep saying slim to none.
No, it's
but
not going to happen. So, because again, they've not even begun planning for the project. I have been meeting with all of the county commissioners, and one by one. In fact, tomorrow we're taking Chris LaValla to lunch and meeting with him and showing him how little beach there is down in North Reddington Beach, and trying to make sure that one by one that they're all buying in. And so whenever we're finally told, hell no, you're not getting any of our money, and the Army Corps of Engineers is not going to help, I'm working diligently to get a firm commitment from the county, from Pinellas County, that they will 100% fund this project, because we have the money. They have $35 million right now waiting to do something with it concerning beach nourishment. And that's our money. Whether we like it or not, these Airbnbs and all this traffic and everything
How
that's
about all
going
the
on.
taxes they collect on us
That's,
too?
we sacrifice for that money, and
if we get that 35 million or whatever percentage, if the state always kicked in another 20%.
I
And then
don't
the
think
Fed
that
would
they
kick in
will, I
60.
don't believe that they will commit to anything unless the Army Corps has approved it.
So this is going to be all private.
This will be all Pinellas County doing it, but we do have the money, and the way that I'm approaching this, and when I say we, not us, the way that I'm approaching this is you're reinvesting, and you're getting ready to spend millions and millions on these baseball complexes and new stadiums and all this, hundreds of millions of dollars. Well, what do you think got it all here? It
Yeah.
surely wasn't the middle of the of our peninsula. It was the beaches. And so reinvest and put it back, and let's keep doing it. And so I'll let you know at our next meeting. I'll let you know how it goes, or I'll contact you and send you an email that says, hey, you can share this with the council.
You can take them down to 6th Street tomorrow, make them peanut butter jelly sandwiches for lunch, and you'll see how there's no beach left there.
Yeah, I know. All right, that's all I've got. Last chance to say anything else for this meeting. Otherwise, I'm going to request a motion
Motion.
for adjournment. Second? Anyone have a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor? All right. Thanks for being so patient and great meeting, everyone.
Good luck tomorrow.